All right, it is my pleasure to call to order the Wednesday, August 6th meeting of the Freeport Planning Board. We have a busy agenda tonight. We'll dive right in. Item number 1 is an information exchange. Kyle, you have an update on items reviewed by the PRB?
Yeah, so since we had the meeting July 23rd, the extra planning board meeting, no updates on PRB items. The PRB will meet later this month on the 20th, so we'll have more to share next month on that. Update on the zoning text amendments reviewed by the council. So last night, the council did vote to adopt the VC1 building height increase on Depot Street. So that went through. So that process is finished. So that's it, though, for info exchange.
Oh, that's 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Nice little package. Great. Item number 2 is a review of the minutes from the July 2nd Planning Board meeting. Full house that night, so everybody's eligible to vote. Does anybody have anything to call out on that?
Yes. Since Wayne's not here, I believe on page 6, it says implicit, and then implicitly, and I believe the second time it should be explicitly. You see where it is? I'll mark it for you.
Which part of the page?
I wanted to, it's here, right here. You see, Chair, Mr. Jortner feels it is implicit that we are in favor of the laws being enforced, and we don't have to say that explicitly.
Gotcha. Yep, I would agree that that was his intent.
And then I wanted to make 2 comments. One is just rereading these minutes. I wish we could, I would like to communicate to whoever that the LD 1829 has serious implications on the town's ability to run itself. And so it's Augusta telling the town how to behave, and I object. And I think the town council should object. Incidentally, most of what it is after, as we've discussed, is good sense, but it takes away town rights. And the second thing I wanted to point out is that also related to LD 1829 and the height limit that we just raised on Depot Street. The combination of those 2 things means that we did not raise the height limit to 55 feet. We raised it to 69 feet. And that's 69, under the condition that 50% of that building that has the 69-foot height is affordable housing. That may be okay. I mean, it's done, and I agree with it, but I just wanted to make, for the record, I believe everybody should know what was done.
Well, I just want to clarify, though, that the 14 feet of additional height that LD 1829 would require wouldn't go into effect until next summer. So
we have a 1-year reprieve
yeah.
on that.
So
Okay.
if at that time,
The town council were to say, we don't want that
Yeah.
being imposed upon us, then perhaps there's a year, okay, good.
So it's, yeah,
This
I
was
think
a good
it's
discussion, I'm done.
because, yeah, just because it is in these meeting notes and we're talking about these meeting notes, I'm trying to stay narrow. But all of this will come up, like this new law would require changes throughout the ordinance, so we would have chances to tweak and add and change things as we're going through again. So it's,
Okay, good.
it's so that the height,
I just thought we should all be aware of this.
Yep,
It
the
was
height-
like struck me as reading it. you
the
know?
height increase on Depot Street is the height increase on Depot Street for now.
Yep.
And then,
So right now, 55 feet stands.
Correct.
That's correct. Okay,
and then
good.
there's things in the future, and they will be discussed again. in
Yeah, so
Noticed
Thank you.
hearings and lots of
I
chances.
did bring it up at the council hearing last night as well in the
The,
discussion.
the,
or I
the,
think-
the impact of
yeah,
1829.
so I think Chalmers actually raised the comment, so then, responding to that, yeah, that Yeah, so, right, there is that implication if you left the 55 feet, that could be an issue down the line once we had to adopt that LD 1829 changes. But, we can sort of revisit the conversation then to see if if we need to make any other changes to kind of capture what the town wants height-wise. So for now, we'll stick with the 55.
Any other comments on the minutes from July 2nd?
Just a couple of spelling errors, sorry, Sharon.
That's okay.
Page 2, second sentence, or second, where Mr. Ruda clarified, but underneath that, lot size larger.
Lager. Yeah.
Oh, right, large.
And then on page 8, last paragraph, fourth sentence down, just to the right of the middle, rooftop.
Great. Anything else? Do I hear a motion to approve as amended at tonight's meeting?
Yes, I'd like to move.
Second that.
All in favor? I believe that was unanimous. I couldn't see Andrew's hand, but
Yes.
Yes, yes. Sharon does an amazing job of capturing the minutes. Charles, who's in
Sharon.
the audience, would be pleased to know that the minutes include the fact that you mentioned that you were glad to see us all and that you hoped we were having a good summer.
Charles will go down as just a nice guy in Freeport history. Accurately, I might add. And I expect that to be in the next time. Item number 3 is a public hearing to review and discuss the current draft, maybe final draft, of the 2025 Freeport Comprehensive Plan. Obviously, it's been a long road to get here, so I think we're all excited about the possibilities for the future. Charles, do you have anything for us tonight?
Yeah, cool. That's on. Sweet. Hello, everyone. Thanks again for having me. Lovely to be back in here and excited that we're at the public hearing part of this plan with the planning board. I don't have a presentation prepared. I think we've seen a bunch of iterations of this plan from rough inventory chapter drafts all the way to the current version of the plan. I believe this is the final version of the plan, barring any clerical errors, but I do believe we're really happy with what this is. It's been approved by this, or found consistent with state requirements, and we've incorporated a lot of their comments into the plan. So I'm happy to answer questions from the public about how we reached it, or answer any final clarification questions from the board.
I mean, just to add on, this is really, if there's no additional comments, this would be pretty much the last stop for the board. It would, if the board was ready, we provided a proposed motion in the staff memo
Can I see the proposed motion?
to send this over to the council so they can set the public hearing and hold their own public hearing for adoption.
I had a comment and a change to the motion, but I seem to have lost it.
Yeah, so I'll say for this, I feel like 2 items are on agenda tonight. The motions are a little different than what the board would normally do. Usually with a zoning text amendment is what we normally have, and you're finding it's consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan. You're not going to find that the new comprehensive plan is consistent with the former comprehensive plan. So, we took a stab at a motion there, but yeah, if there's changes, happy to
Yep.
hear those out.
I did it in advance and can't find it, but it's simple.
I would say while Mitch is writing that, I would say that the plan is still available. I think town office has a couple hard copies for folks to look
There's
at,
one on the
and in the
table.
back of this room, and it's available online at futurefreeport.com. And we'll keep that site up probably through the end of the year. So that's where it'll live, and then we will, I think the town will have copies available by request and have some available right now.
Is there public comment before we make a motion?
Oh, right. Yeah, we are doing a public hearing. Does anybody have anything before we open a public hearing? Do I hear a motion to open public hearing?
Motion to open a public hearing on Freeport Comprehensive Plan.
And a second?
Second?
All in favor? All right, public hearing is now open. Would anybody like to speak on the potentially final draft of the updated 2025 Freeport Comprehensive Plan?
But online.
You would think that this was boring to get to
I
this
know.
point, but it doesn't feel like it was, but I'll keep bringing up the letter at the beginning. Does anybody have a chance to read that?
I did.
All right. Do
I thought
you
it
guys
was
feel
good.
okay about it?
I thought it was well-crafted. Nice job.
All right.
So I had a comment and a change to the motion. And, the-
Close the public hearing first.
oh yeah, we gotta close the public hearing first. Unless, is there anybody online?
No.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
All in favor? All right, public hearing is now closed. Mitch, do you want to talk about your motion before you make it, or?
No, I think it'd be, well, my comment will be reflected in the change to the motion, which is
Yeah.
really minor.
Okay.
And so the comment is just to say that I think that the process that we went through was really good, that North Star did a really good job, and that there was a tremendous amount of community involvement. And so, you know, I think that's important to put on the record, and so I would like to change the motion. Be it ordered that the Freeport Planning Board recommend that the Town Council adopt the Freeport Comprehensive Plan 2025 as the plan has been developed in accordance with state law and found complete and consistent with the state's Growth Management Act by the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry, period. The plan was based on extensive community input, is congruent with the Downtown Vision Plan, the Climate Action Plan, and I'm not sure if we should call it the Dog Bone Plan or the
Dog Bone Work Group report.
the Dog Bone Work Group report, and aligns with best practices for town planning.
Do I hear a second?
A second. Oh,
Everybody's seconding it. That's a good sign. All in favor? Great. Congratulations, everyone.
Thank you, Charles.
A lot of applause at
It
Freeport.
was
Planning Board.
18 months?
I think 18 months. We started
Wow.
December 2023, I think.
I think are we a couple weeks early still, based on the original timeline?
We're earlier than.
We did add another workshop and a couple other public hearings, but I think for
But we're
the,
still 1 month ahead of schedule, assuming you guys, that the town council does it in September.
Thank you,
Thanks, everyone.
Charles. Thank
See
you
you
very
on
much.
Charles.
Yep.
Oh, I'm ahead of that.
I would echo everything Mitch said.
No, I
I think,
don't know.
there was a lot of community involvement, and I think it was a good process. I'm pleased to be on the other side of, at least of our part of it, and see, and I doubt many people have read the letter yet, but, at the beginning, but I do think that while we can congratulate ourselves currently, I think the real work is really in the future still, so that's exciting. All right, item number, ooh, geez, sorry, my mouse ran away. Four.
Four.
Is another public hearing to discuss a moratorium ordinance, or a proposed moratorium ordinance on paid parking facilities with a retroactive date of applicability of June 24th, 2025, that would prohibit charging the general public to park in the VC1, Village Commercial 1, and Village Commercial 2 districts. This is, as far as the planning board, obviously the town council has discussed this, and they would like to have us review the moratorium or proposed moratorium with an eye toward the existing ordinance language. So our scope is pretty narrow. I think the question for us is the existing ordinance clear enough to guide these parking facilities, or is there additional clarity that is needed in the ordinance? So that's really the question, and I think we, hopefully tonight, we'll keep our focus pretty narrow, to try to take a look at it just through that lens of where are the holes in the existing ordinance language, and do we think it would be beneficial to have time to close some of those holes and provide additional information and clarity for.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question about the process here?
Yeah.
So you're saying we should have no discussion about the wisdom or sensibility of a moratorium? We need to discuss how the ordinances need to be adopted to accomplish that?
No, I think, we can talk about a moratorium, but I think, yes, I think that's fair, right? We can talk about a moratorium,
I missed
and if
the,
that's the right way.
What's
Is
our
that your
task?
question?
I
Is like, is
guess
it
I'm
the
trying
right
to
way?
understand exactly what's our task.
so the,
I see the ordinance that the town council drafted, or somebody drafted.
so the town council had this moratorium language on their agenda. They recommended it to the planning board because the town attorney's opinion was that it had to follow the typical process that any zoning amendment would go through because it impacts the zoning ordinance. So therefore, usually zoning amendments start in the planning board sends them off to town council. In this case, it started at the council level. It came to planning board to have the public hearing. That's really the important part, is that we're doing the public hearing to discuss it. And with, as Sam said, the council wants the board to, specifically kind of speak to the idea of paid parking and, whether the board thinks that that's adequately handled in the current ordinance, not necessarily dive into.
Can you help us find in the current ordinance where this is discussed?
Well, that's kind of what I talked about in the memo, which I can highlight those couple
I'm
points,
pulling it
right?
back up.
So, right, so in the VC1 and VC2, right, you can have two types of parking. There's shared parking, or there's parking outside of shared parking, right? We have a definition for shared parking. It says you can't restrict shared parking, through things like signage, specific for a business, or, you can't charge for shared parking. And that's where the notion that, shared parking is free comes from. And a lot of our shared parking downtown, or a lot of our parking downtown is in that shared model. But, you could also have parking in the downtown area that's not shared. And there isn't a definition of that type of parking. So that's one thing for the board to consider, right? So, shared parking, it's a little more clear, where it's, defined as, that can't be paid. But parking outside of shared is not defined, so it's a little more ambiguous. So that's one thing for the board to consider.
It should be a planning
Adequately.
ordinance and not an ordinance. It comes out of planning. So you have a private parking lot, and they choose not to put it into shared parking. That exists all over town. And what they do on that lot, whether they can or can't charge for that lot, would be a zoning ordinance?
Yeah, that would be in our zoning ordinance. That would be in our off-street parking section,
Okay.
probably. Because that's
Like a
where we regulate.
permissible
off-
use.
Yep, that's where we regulate off-street parking, so, there could, part of this isn't necessarily the time to dive into specific options for standards. That's what the moratorium time period would really be used for. But it's to consider the existing ordinance and how it speaks to paid parking currently. For those of you who attended or maybe watched after, the council held the parking workshop last week, so a lot of people came out and kind of talked about their thoughts around paid parking downtown. So that's sort of supporting some of this too. But so back to kind of what I was talking about, in addition to the shared parking, definition versus, parking outside of shared parking, not having a definition, there's also the idea of if you were going to have paid parking downtown, like let's say, you wanted to have paid parking as an option outside of shared parking. We don't have any performance standards regulating that currently. So presumably if you were going to want that, you would want to clarify to what extent or how it would be done, like we do with other, performance standards around parking and lots of other things. So that's another sort of piece of this that's, currently unspoken to in the ordinance, is we have no real guidance if someone were to come forward with a paid parking proposal about how we would regulate that, if at all. It could turn out that maybe people, don't want it regulated at all, or it could turn out that, maybe there are things we want to look at. But again, that would be something that you could potentially look at during that moratorium period. And then, so part of what the moratorium talks about is this idea that, downtown Freeport has long used this idea of shared parking and this idea that, you could come into the downtown and park once and kind of go anywhere in the downtown without having to move your car around. So currently, there's no real regulation though to look at a conversion, like a mass conversion of shared parking to not shared parking. If a use can meet its minimum parking requirement for, as not shared, then they would simply come in and get a recalculation and, they could potentially switch their shared parking to not shared parking. But it's another consideration. If the goal of the town is to have this shared parking pool, and there's no real mechanism to prevent people from going from shared to not shared as long as you can meet your parking requirement, is that something the town wants to look at and consider different options? So those were a couple of things that I highlighted in the memo that just kind of jumped out at me in the ordinance as, things that could probably use some more clarification, from community feedback to looking at different, policy options. So that's really what the basis of the moratorium time period would be. That would be time that we could spend looking at those things. But that's if the planning board agrees with those types of things or has other things in mind that you all believe would be valuable to look at during that time period. So that's really the conversation that the board should be having tonight. And then, if the board is in favor of recommending the moratorium language back to the council, then we've put a proposed motion. It's worded non-specifically, depending on how the board lands on this issue. I will say that the council's recommendation was that a planning board recommendation come back prior to, I believe, August 18th. So this isn't something that the council was really looking for the board to deliberate on for, numerous meetings. I would say the board should make a recommendation one way or the other to the council.
I mean, it seems like we're, I listened to the workshop the other night that occurred a week or so ago regarding parking, and there were a lot of, there was a lot of push against paid parking in town here. It does seem like it's causing a bit of stir, and I think that given some of the, issues or concerns that Kyle just raised, it makes a lot of sense to, take a pause here and take a look and see what we are doing with parking. I do think it's important to this town.
Yeah, I think it's, Mitch, to just build on a little bit of the background, which I think is helpful. I mean, we've been talking about parking forever on the planning board. I always think, like, my very first planning board meeting was about parking, and specifically about shared parking and reductions in parking requirements. So, and it's come up again since then, kind of a couple year intervals. And I think this particular, this type of consideration has not come up, like looking at ways in which, or the differences between shared and unshared or whatever. I mean, the fact that it's not defined maybe is kind of an indication that there is an issue. It's never really been a problem before. We've had plenty of parking in town, and we've lowered it, I think, for reasons that are very well documented in an attempt to spur development on some of the excess parking that we have. So I think it's an indication that we probably should spend a little bit of time, and maybe it needs to be a higher priority than it hasn't really been, certainly on my radar before, that we need to really dive in and clarify this part of the ordinance. But it does seem like that needs to happen. I know we have a work plan, and this wasn't necessarily on it when we put it together a couple months ago. But, you know, I think we can find space if we need to address a critical issue. And I think also the moratorium, I mean, there's language right in there. If it doesn't need to be as long, we can shorten it. If we need additional time, we need additional time. And then one other note on the process, I think the town council would like a swift recommendation. And then, just as a note, as they always are, we make our recommendation, we hold the public hearing, that's part of the process. They are not bound to listen to us. Hopefully they do, and hopefully we make a well-considered recommendation, but they will do what they will. On the, 18th you said, right?
I think
That's not the right,
that's not the
Monday.
date of the council hearing. I think that was the date they wanted the planning board's.
Oh, gotcha.
recommendation to
Okay, so
happen
then it'd probably be the following week or something. Okay.
on the 2nd.
Does the board have any other questions? And then if you're looking for that section, it is section 514. It's on page 154 of the Freeport zoning ordinance, if you have that pulled up in front of you. Section 514 is the off-street parking loading. I don't think it makes sense to read through it right now, but that's where these standards and or lack of clarity is, that's the place to look.
Who's got comments?
Questions, comments from the board before we open the public hearing?
This, the language that, where did this language come from? The stock language from some, how was it developed?
I assume the town attorney put the language together and then brought it to council. Yeah.
I'm listening.
Siri is,
Does Siri have any thoughts on this?
Siri was about to comment on this.
Siri wrote the moratorium language.
I mean, I feel like it's a little over. It's kind of alarmist here.
It's
But,
legalese.
you know, if that's the way it's gotta be, but I mean, you know, I just flag some of the language. These effects could have potentially serious implications with health, safety, and welfare of town and its residents, property. I mean, yeah, it has some impact, but.
I'll say that that's general moratorium language. It's not.
If you're gonna do a moratorium, you better have a good,
Yep.
so,
But yeah, I mean, to go back to Sam's point, having the moratorium and the time period, you're not necessarily obligated to make any one change. It's really an open time period to investigate and gather feedback, and, you know, if the amendments do come out of it, then they can, and if they don't, there's nothing that says they have to.
So basically, you envision us going through the parking ordinance and then looking at this situation to see how we can,
I don't think we've talked at the staff level about exactly what the process would be yet, but I
we have a
envision there would
moratorium, we
be.
gotta figure out what our work, what
Right, but I
we're doing
envision
during the moratorium.
there could be more public engagement early
Of course, of
on in
course.
it to gather, you know, direction, and then, yeah, it could come back to the board.
Obviously, we
and-
gotta go through, we
Right.
gotta go through the process of
Yeah, and then,
reviewing the ordinance and then listening to the public about what's going on downtown and listening to the, you know, it's not really an applicant, but the Historical Society has a dog in this fight.
I think one thing to me that supports at least hitting the pause button on parking in town is the ongoing planning effort right now that's already been kicked off and I believe is underway, right, with the Route 1 corridor reimagining, redesign. And I know if anyone was at that kickoff meeting or listened to it after the fact, parking is a big part. Street parking, whether it's paid or not, how rates are set, not that there necessarily will be maybe there will be specific recommendations in that report, but I think we are already in a period of planning for parking downtown. So I think that's on the positive side. I think we've already started the effort of figuring out what parking in downtown Freeport needs to look like. So maybe this is a good time to make sure nothing changes too quickly in the meantime, so that we don't have to undo anything when that report comes out, and perhaps a moratorium is a sensible way to achieve that goal.
I agree. I'd be interested to hear what the public has to say.
Not surprisingly, I have some comments. So based on the fact that there are no standards and that we need to have some, I don't see any choice. So I wanted to make that comment first, and that this seems like we have to do it. I also wanted to acknowledge that at the parking workshop that the town council held, there was a clear public consensus in favor of free parking, both the public and commercial shop owner consensus. On the other hand, I am very aware that this affects private property rights, and that right now you do have the right to take a parking lot and say it is yours and only yours. And so now it was already, and we're only talking about people who have parking lots that are theirs and only theirs, and what they may do with their private property. So I believe time is of the essence. And I don't like an open-ended, I mean, the proposal here is 6 months with an option to extend 6 more months. To be fair to the council, to the staff, it takes a long time for the wheels of justice to turn. I've learned that. So maybe there is no way to shorten that time frame, but I would like to know if we could. And that brings up 2 more points. One is, what is the process that we will take from here to get to conclusion? And which obviously we can't have done tonight, but I would demand that we do it quickly. And what studies are required for us to make informed and wise decisions?
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a little open-ended. I mean, I know it's not necessarily, you know, immediate next step is, right, it would go back to council, and they would need to actually adopt the moratorium. And then I assume we would get more direction from council at that point, you know, to the level of community engagement and feedback that we want. Like, that'll drive some of that initial time period. You know, would it be a meeting? Would it be a survey? Would it be a couple meetings? Like, what level of engagement are we looking at there? And then depending on the feedback that we get, like, what are the scope of changes that the public and the council and the board are really looking at? Because depending on, you know, if it's adding a definition and, you know, changing a couple standards,
Clarifying
you
the
know,
process.
right, I mean, that could be, you know, a relatively
do we-
quickly to put together an amendment. You know, if it's, the larger that the scope of work gets, obviously, the, you know, the more complicated things become and the longer, you know, it could be. But
Do we and/or the town council have the rights to ban paid parking on private property?
yep, you could regulate it, yep. You couldn't apply it to, you know, I mean, in zoning, you can't apply a specific standard like that to, you know, you can't pick and choose. But if it's kind of like a district-wide requirement, then, yeah.
I assume it's a land use issue, just like everything else, and it's tied to
Right.
how their square footage or whatever their allocation of parking is. I mean,
And it is, I mean, the moratorium is specific to paid, like, there's still many other things that an owner of a parking lot could do with the parking lot. It's not to say that they can barricade it off, right?
Right, they could barricade off, so
Develop it.
in this particular case that we have, they have more parking than they need, so they could just barricade it off.
That would be yes,
not-
theoretically, yeah, if somebody,
It's just not highest and best use of the.
if they're not, right, because if it's not in a shared parking pool and being leased, like, then it would be privately owned, right? And so somebody who has a single ownership and it's not in a pool that has multiple beneficiaries or users of the pool, then sure, it's private property. Am I understanding that right, Kyle?
Even shared parking is still private property. It just meets a different.
Right, but it's
regulated differently.
But they-
and the fact that it can be regulated that way is contingent on the fact that it's available. So you couldn't
Right, right.
own it and then also have a count toward shared parking. So,
Yeah, because if your, permits are tied to shared parking,
right.
I would assume you'd have to go back to some board, maybe PRB or whoever, and say, I want to reverse my,
Right.
Right.
plates, my things that the PRB signed, or the planning board at the time, because there was no PRB years ago.
Yeah.
You would think it
and
would
you'd have to come
probably
in for an
do it.
amendment, basically.
Typically, that would be a site
Plan amendment.
review, right? Because you have a site, your site plan, if you're a
Yeah.
business in town, your site plan is contingent on meeting the parking either by having it on site or being able to show that it's met.
Somewhere else.
Somewhere,
That's right.
somehow you are meeting the parking standards that are in this ordinance. And so if you change the way you're meeting it, then you would have to, technically, you would have to go through that process. So, I think, yeah.
I agree with Mitch, though, with regard to the timing and just jamming up private property owners, and doing whatever we can to, and maybe that includes getting rid of this, renewal, potential renewal.
I would, yeah.
Or making it 30 days, making a 30
A
days.
renewal, like a 60-day
I think
extension on another
rather
100.
than change the moratorium language, maybe we could just make it clear in our recommendation to the council that this is fast-tracked.
That's all we
I
can
wouldn't
do.
want to
I think
necessarily
that's
tie
appropriate.
hands. I also think I would be,
I don't know how fast we can do the work that has to be done.
I would be cautiously optimistic that we don't need to go out and get additional studies. I think we have a lot of the information that we need. We have a recent parking study that's been done. We have a very newly updated and adopted, hopefully, at least recommended, I should say, comprehensive plan. We have a new comprehensive plan that can guide, we have a downtown vision plan that can guide some of the priorities for town. I mean, we have a lot of the head of steam that I think we need to evaluate how the town wants to treat
Seem to have
parking.
a study that shows parking use at peak times.
We have some data
Seems
points about
like
that.
we're missing that.
I think it's,
I mean, that's the question. If we have it, then we don't have to discuss it here.
yeah, I think we have maybe
That would be
the
the odd
best
dot,
we're
you know?
going to get of that
Yeah, I
right
mean,
now.
I think early on in that process, if it was adopted and, so we're starting out the moratorium, that's the sort of stuff we kind of look to see what we have, what we don't have.
That's right.
What's still needed for policymaking decisions, and, if there's something like that needed and we don't have it, then, we go after it. But yeah, we would.
But we do,
That would be an early step, for
we
sure.
do have the study that shows, that runs a couple of different models from Walker, is that right? The name of the
They sort
consulting
of
group?
modeled out what.
They sort of modeled out what demand looked like and how many they estimated in different scenarios of how downtown is built out over the next few years with different mixes of housing versus other uses, what different demand scenarios would look like to give us a sense of how much excess parking we have, which I think, all of these are useful data points as we puzzle through this. But I think ultimately, it's really a community question too, and we've heard some feedback, but maybe there's another opportunity or another way to get community feedback in another forum. So I think what I'm hearing from the board, and we do still need to open, don't let me forget that we still need to open a public hearing. But what I'm hearing from the board is sort of broad support for a moratorium with the understanding that we need to move relatively quick, or not relatively, we need to move quickly on this. So unless there are other comments, do I hear a motion to,
Open the public hearing.
I'll count that as a motion, right? Second? All in favor? All right, public hearing is now open. So members of the public who are here to speak on the proposed moratorium, as a reminder, please make your way to the podium, state who you are. The microphone does not need to be moved. Tom has made sure it's in the perfect place. Don't be shy.
Good evening. I feel like I need to wish you all a happy summer and good to see you, so it's in the minutes as well. My name is Katie Wise. I am the Director of Design and Construction at LL Bean. Thanks for having me here tonight. As we stated in a letter to the Town Council on July 14th, and as we stated publicly at the parking workshop that the Town Council hosted, we are in favor of a moratorium, and we are opposed to paid parking in downtown Freeport. We are, as the Walker study shows, a third owner of the shared parking. I said this at the Town Council, but I think it bears repeating. There's no such thing as LL Bean spaces. It's all shared. We think that this model has worked really well. We're committed to having that shared parking model. We have 60-plus regional stores outside of Maine. Not many people know that. And we have really interesting data that when those regional stores, when the developments or downtowns or places implement paid parking, it affects business. It affects the retail business around it. And so we really don't want that to happen to our flagship and downtown Freeport and the other businesses. We care deeply about visitors here. Freeport has a visitor-friendly reputation, which we'd like to see remain. And we also think deeply about customers and dwell time. We try to get customers here, visitors here, we want them to stay. We think that implementing paid parking is a literal timeline of having to go, feel like you only have 2 hours, half hour, whatever it may be. And we actively try to prevent that. We want people to stay for as long and eat here and visit all the local businesses, come to our store, come to the events, et cetera. I think one of the most important pieces is the development piece. So the downtown vision plan was mentioned. I myself have sat through and interacted with many different meetings and collaborations about the downtown vision plan. And I think if we have paid parking tied up in leases in downtown for 5, 10, 1, however many years, that goes against a lot of the hopes of the downtown vision plan, which I think would be a loss. Lastly, I just want to say that we, once again, support a moratorium, ask for your approval of that, and thank you for your time and consideration.
Thanks, Katie.
Good evening. My name is Eric Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Freeport Historical Society and a trustee of First Parish Church, two nonprofits that for decades have relied on parking revenue to support our operations in Freeport's historic downtown. To be clear, I'm here expressly in my nonprofit roles this evening. I have no place in the council process that is related to this moratorium. I have and will continue to recuse myself from any conversation, deliberation, or action on this moratorium as it relates to the council. Because the Freeport Historical Society's recent lease of 30 parking spaces has been cited as the catalyst for this proposed moratorium, I want to explain how we got here before turning to why I believe the moratorium itself is deeply flawed. The Historical Society has owned the Harrington House at 45 Main Street since 1977. In the 1980s, we developed a 56-space parking lot on what was originally the Harrington Orchard. And in the 1990s, the town of Freeport approached the Historical Society and asked, implored, incentivized us to join our parking lot with the landowners on the Nathan Nye side and the Howard Place side, and including the town lot that used to be the staff lot for the Bartol Library. And we agreed, even though it reduced our parking and our control of the land. Why? Because we believed it would benefit the town, and because revenue from our share of that lot would help support our mission. Since then, this lot has always been primarily a source of revenue for the Historical Society. That's why we pay property taxes on it as a rental property. From 2001 to today, we've paid over $160,000 in shared maintenance costs for that lot, without any say, control, influence over how that money is spent. Until 2019, we covered that through leases to downtown businesses. And at that time, our maintenance costs were only a quarter of what the revenue was. But in 2018, this board and the town changed how downtown parking requirements are calculated. Businesses no longer needed to lease additional spaces. That made sense in policy, but its financial impact on nonprofits like ours was well understood at the time. That's over 5 years ago. The town and LL Bean helped cushion the initial hit to our budget in that first year in 2019. But since then, our members and our donors have had to absorb those costs. The hope from all of us in the town was that your relaxation of the requirements would spur development of what you acknowledged was excess parking. The development of those excess parking lots would rebalance the shared pool and restore the demand for the existing lots. None of that has happened since the vote in 2018. That result is still years away. By 2020, our parking revenue dropped to zero. Our maintenance costs didn't. We have spent $36,000 in the last 5 years on the shared maintenance costs of that lot. And we have raised this concern year after year after year. We've asked the co-owners, including the town, to revise the easement and the maintenance agreement. Each time we've heard the same reply: the current arrangement works for them. Meanwhile, most people using this lot are not visiting the Historical Society, but we're still paying the bill. When last fall we were told that our share of planned resurfacing in 2025 would be $30,000 on top of our regular annual maintenance costs, we made it clear that we could not absorb that cost. The response? Figure it out or sell it. So we figured it out. We leased 30 spaces for paid parking. We kept enough free spaces to meet the town's shared parking requirement. We did what we had to do legally, responsibly, and with full transparency. Now, the same parties who told us to solve the problem are trying to take our solution off the table. So let's look at the moratorium briefly, point by point, all of that language that you just looked at. Because you're right, it does sound dire, and it's not. A, Freeport businesses need adequate parking. Yes. But that study, the Walker study, shows that our 2,310 off-street parking spaces are far more than are needed. That's why you reduced parking requirements. That's why the town plans to redevelop surface lots on Depot Street into housing. B, shared parking was carefully designed over years. Yes, but you acknowledged it was out of balance 5 years ago. That's why you changed it. C, regulatory changes have reduced the value of parking lots. Yes, and that includes our property. The moratorium openly acknowledges it. D, charging for any spaces removes all spaces from shared parking. That's not anywhere in existing ordinance. That's a staff interpretation. We've asked repeatedly to see the legal basis. It doesn't exist. Large-scale removal would harm the town center. What's happening is not large-scale. We leased 30 spaces within a lot of 292 spaces. The town is planning to remove as many as 800 spaces on Depot Street from the shared parking pool. If that's acceptable, then how can 30 spaces threaten such grave harm? F, ordinances can't prevent the serious harm from proliferation. Where is the proliferation? Paid parking has quietly existed in the St. Jude's parking lot on School Street for 2 years without incident, without complaint. Irritation? Maybe. Eye roll? Maybe. No complaint. No serious public harm. G&H, the town needs time to study. We do love a study. We've had 5 years since this board started the ball in motion that led to this effect. We've been raising this concern the whole time. Another 6 months won't solve it for us, and it won't solve it for the town. And the situation is an emergency. Where is the emergency? This is the question that you just brought up. The reason that language is there is by state statute. You have to have a land use moratorium. You have to find that this issue meets one of two thresholds. Either the lack of it would cause a scarcity or overburden a public resource, which you cannot find because A, there's no scarcity, there's a surplus, and B, most of the parking isn't public, it's private, as you just pointed out. Or the other threshold is it must pose serious harm to the public. Serious harm. For 2 years on School Street, has there been any harm, let alone serious harm? Let's be honest. This is not an emergency. It's an attempt to preserve a system that works for some by punishing one party that is trying earnestly to meet its obligations.
So if we were to do this, does that mean that your lot, that would be removed from your lot, or you've done it? It's there for whatever contracted period of time, and it's there for, right? So this is stopping additional.
This is retroactive. And you can ask for a staff opinion about whether it applies to us or not, but my understanding is because even though for 2 years St. Jude's has operated this way in the exact same manner that we proposed to.
Right, I'm aware.
The code enforcement officer has determined that there were not the appropriate sign permits. And this moratorium directs the staff to not issue any permits related to paid parking during the moratorium. That means that anybody that doesn't already have permits and didn't have them, not only retroactive to the date here, but didn't have them 45 days in advance of that date, cannot operate paid parking. That is my understanding. So if paid parking has caused no harm on School Street for 2 years, why are our 30 spaces an emergency? 3 reasons. Location, location, location. As our Director Emeritus Jim Cram once said, echoing George Orwell, in Freeport, all parking spaces are equal. Some are more equal than others. And that is why it doesn't matter how many excess spaces there are on Depot Street, 30 spaces in our lot is a crisis. Our lot is heavily used. Our spaces are valuable, but while others benefit from using them, we're told they're not worth paying for by those businesses. They're just worth being free. So I ask you, is it reasonable for local nonprofits to subsidize parking for multi-billion-dollar retailers? Should our donors who give to preserve Freeport's history be asked to pay for retail parking? There's no such thing as free parking. The question is who pays? We've asked our neighbors to help. They've said no. Now they say their customers shouldn't have to pay either. So again, who pays? Our members? Our mission? Our donors who are giving us funds they expect us to use to preserve the history and culture of this community, we turn around and use it to pay for retail parking. Perhaps that is the most recent history and culture of the town of Freeport. In a sea of free parking, no one is forcing anyone to pay. You have the option if you want the convenience or not. Speaking of history, if you will indulge me, I'll share you with a brief anecdote. Long before the system of town leases for parking to meet shared parking requirements, there was paid parking in Freeport. My father spent many of his days off from the fire department sitting at the entrance to the First Parish Church lot where he was a trustee at the time, taking donations from people who wanted to park conveniently. He raised thousands of dollars for the church that way. And people were happy to pay for that convenience, some of them. And to others who didn't want to pay, he was happy to tell them with a smile, "Well, keep circling." Every day, Freeport Historical Society pays for 44 spaces so other people can use them. We're simply asking for people to use 30 of them to cover the cost. This isn't a long-term solution, but we've run out of short-term ones. It's been years. We're $36,000 down with another $30,000 bill pending. So where will that money come from in the 6 months or up to a year while the town studies this issue? This moratorium doesn't protect the public. It punishes one party for trying to meet its obligations. And I respectfully ask that you not find that incidental paid parking poses an immediate threat to the public, and instead allow small nonprofits to ask the public to pay for what they use. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I do have a question, because I think a lot of what you said is very compelling. But location is the issue in your case. How well marked or segregated is your parking lot if you were to put it in paid parking? Because one of the complaints that was very clearly stated at the town council session was people didn't know. They saw the paid parking thing up, they parked over there, and they paid your thing.
And if I step in, before we go too far into this, I just want to clarify for the board. The board's role here isn't to discuss the details of this one particular case. The topic is a larger discussion. As Eric pointed out, the moratorium talks about a kind of singular case sparking the conversation, but that's not the intent of the moratorium, to only speak to the details of that.
Well,
So the board shouldn't discuss a single.
Well, there's a reason why this is
project
relevant,
or-
because I agree with the speaker that if it is required to put a moratorium in place on zoning, that we find an emergency situation exists, that emergency situation I do not find exists, unless the only thing you said that made me wonder was serious public harm. And the serious public harm is if somebody is paying for parking that they don't need to pay for. So if it is isolated, just like the St. Jude's lot is isolated, I do not see any serious public harm. If it is not isolated and well marked, I do. I'm done.
So just to answer your question, Mitch, I think that is a key question, and it is the balance that we would need to work through in the application process for signage that you all are very familiar with. There is the tension between not wanting too much signage and wanting everything to be clear. And so we would like to, we clearly feel that we can adequately sign it. It's why we chose the 30 spaces that we chose. They're in a contained row. They have end caps on them that can be signed. It can be between these two signs. They can be striped differently, but we're told that to even restripe, that needs a site plan amendment. If we were to change the configuration of the parking by changing how it is striped. So that, again, is an application that our tenant, the third party that we lease to, would have to go through with PRB. But if you approve this moratorium, the PRB won't even take an application for it.
I'll say that that's kind of what I was getting to when I was talking about some of the points in the memo, is that we don't currently have performance standards to regulate paid parking facilities. You know,
So-
just like any project, you could have an applicant come forward and do something a certain way, but you could have someone come forward and do it a completely different way. So that's sort of one of the areas in our ordinance that if we were to allow paid parking facilities, you'd probably want to guide those types of applications with standards to get the outcome that the town wanted. We don't currently have it.
So even if there were some sort of application in the PRB, they wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right, right. There wouldn't be a requirement for a specific type of signage or
He's
not.
smart in moments like this.
So I guess I'm not clear whether or not, you know, there's parking I haven't seen it. So it's installed, there's paid parking, it sounds like, in behind the Oyster place.
There's paid parking at St. Jude's.
Yeah,
We
I know
were
that, yeah.
required by codes enforcement to remove anything that referred to paid parking once it was installed. So it continues to operate at St. Jude's perfectly fine, same piece of equipment, same signs. We were required to remove it from our site. And now that this has kicked this off, we will not be permitted and our tenant will not be permitted to continue to do that because they've been told even before this ordinance is in place, they've been told by codes that they won't even accept an application.
Yeah, this
Wait,
is,
wait,
this
wait, wait,
that seems
hold
a
on,
little
hold on.
overblown.
Sorry, hold on. So,
We're getting way. the
yeah,
scope
Eric,
of the-
so Eric is, as a member of the public, allowed to say pretty much anything, right? But we as a board do need to be very careful
That's right.
about the
This is, we
the
can't get
scope,
into a
our
tit for tat
scope.
here.
Like, we cannot dive into the details of a particular case. The job before us is to make a determination about the ordinance as it exists currently and whether it is sufficient. So, Eric, I thank you for your comments. And of course, anyone is welcome to make comments here, and we will listen gladly. But we as a board do need to be careful about how, about our lines of questioning and about the things that we are considering. So, as hard as it is, and I understand that this is a tricky situation, and I think,
Well, it points out that we don't have the standards. That's what
unfortunately,
that's what it did
kind of
point
the
out.
case, yeah. Or at least that's my takeaway, yeah. But it's a hard one, yeah.
Caroline Pelletier, Assistant Town Manager. I just want to reiterate, I want to get you out of looking at the specifics of property. There's a lot of information when somebody comes in for something. We look through files, we look high-level deeds, there could be easements, there could be site plan approval things in the record. You guys, I want you to take a step back because the question before you is paid parking on a higher level. There's been a couple examples tonight where it's traditional pay at the point of the lot when you're parking, the user's paying rather than whoever else, like Eric said, behind the scenes is paying the cost. It's not site-specific. So the question is, we just finished this downtown visioning. Do we think paid parking by the user in Freeport is a good idea? Do we think it's regulated? Do we think it's clear? Do we think it's not? Kind of take a step back and look at the moratorium language before you to make a recommendation for the council, and really don't get intertwined in the property-specific issues, because we're talking zone, VC1 and VC2 wide. It could be on any parcel that we're talking about, not just these couple of examples. So just ask you to take
If this moratorium is
a little
put
bit
in
higher
place,
level.
would the St. Jude's be undone or not undone?
I'm not going to comment on property-specific
Oh, I
issues
see.
because I'm not the enforcer. I don't have their file in the enforcement history.
I get it.
So I don't feel like I can fairly comment on that. But I'll step away because you might have public online or in the room that want to
Let's
speak.
hear other.
No one's online.
Hi, I'm Mary Babican. I'm the president of the Freeport Historical Society. Thank you for letting us speak. And Eric, thank you. We do not have in-house counsel at Freeport Historical Society. So Eric has taken a lot of time out of his usual duties to run the Historical Society to try to address this issue. And I'm hoping we'll get back to programming soon. everybody likes free parking. I mean, what is not to like? Except that that's a misnomer. It is not free parking. Someone always has to pay for it. And a lot of these points I think Eric has already made, but I think it's really important for everybody to understand. Right now, some of the most coveted parking spots in Freeport are owned by the Freeport Historical Society. And what does that mean? That means that we are responsible for covering the maintenance of them. Our little nonprofit with 2.5 employees is covering the parking for people who are coming to Freeport to spend money at various retailers and restaurants. We are just a nonprofit. We don't think that our membership should be sponsoring or subsidizing Freeport retail. We've had multiple meetings with the other owners of this lot, trying to come to a more equitable solution of how this lot is paid for. No one, including the town, has had any interest in making any changes to this. So that's been very frustrating to us. We own a very valuable piece of real estate in the center of town that should help us sustain the Historical Society. Instead, we are subsidizing shopping in Freeport. And now we have finally found a way to use a property to help us cover our small budget. And the big retailers and the town are trying to stop us from helping with our budget. If the moratorium succeeds in shutting down our ability to lease that land for what it's demonstrably worth, that will be more than a setback. It will be taking value without compensation of land we have maintained and invested in for decades. Freeport Historical Society has always acted in good faith with a deep commitment to the health of this community. We cannot fulfill that mission if we are expected year after year to divert our donor support intended to preserve history and to educate our public to instead cover the costs for parking that overwhelmingly benefits retail tenants. We ask the board not to approve this moratorium and not to take away the solution that we have found after 5 years of getting nowhere with discussions of shared parking with owners of the lot. I think that it's really important that the town, that this moratorium, I think Eric made great points about whether this problem rises to the level of a moratorium. I think that it is worth talking about parking. It is worth talking about paid parking in Freeport. There could be a big discussion. But whether this is an emergency that will stop us from using our parking lot to support the Freeport Historical Society, that just doesn't seem to make sense. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sally Walsh. I grew up in this town. I've since moved away, but when I came back, the first thing I ended up doing was working on accessibility.
Just don't touch the microphone because it makes it hard for people to hear.
Sorry.
You can speak into it, just don't
Okay,
touch it.
anyway.
Thank you.
Here you good.
Yeah.
As I said, I grew up here, but I kept coming back. And when I did come back, the first thing that happened was that I needed to work on accessibility. And the only building that the whole town wanted to get into, which was inaccessible, was the Historical Society building. So fortunately, there was a citizen in town that gave a big donation so we could make it accessible. So what I'm saying to you is that this building and this association is part of the town's museum. It holds its history, it holds Sharon's history, it holds property that people go to play on and so it does not have the resources to solve everybody else's problem. Your job is to solve our problem. And I think whatever you decide to do tonight will impact the ability of taking care of this town's stories, and that we who donate our time and our money can help people get into the building, enjoy the building, and keep your history. So whatever rules you decide to make tonight is going to impact the town's museum and other nonprofits who may not have the retail income to pay the expenses to cover everything else. So just be careful the way you sort of write things up, because these are the situations you're going to have to protect. Thanks.
Anyone else? Sure. I mean, we won't stay here all night. If everybody wants to go like 5 times, we might stop eventually, but.
Katie Wise again, LL Bean. Is this microphone okay? Okay. I want to talk about the word emergency, which obviously is a pretty open-ended, but I would, for those who did see the town council workshop on parking, I would argue that many citizens got up there and with the level of what they would consider emergency. I would say that when this was implemented, it was not only business owners, but it was visitors, complaining to local business owners that this was happening. So in that regard, it felt like an emergency to our customers. And I would encourage us also to look down to Portland to see where this has happened in excess, to see if that is something that we want our town to mimic. And if this moratorium isn't put in place, what is preventing other people from doing this tomorrow, the next day? And then I would argue that it would be a level of emergency. Thank you.
Any other comments before we close the public hearing? Once? I don't think there's any, I think our town manager may be listening in, but otherwise,
No one else.
don't think there's anyone else. Once, twice? Do I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor? All right. Any other discussion from the board?
What happens if there is no moratorium, the process?
Well, if the board doesn't recommend the moratorium, it would still go back to council. You should, as I said, you should recommend either way, and the council would still make its decision. So the council on this or any other zoning amendment that comes before the board for a recommendation to the council ultimately has the final say and can make a decision
They could make
going
a decision
against the
to
planning board's
have a
recommendation.
moratorium even if we don't ask for one.
Yeah.
I mean, is this an emergency?
I'd like to get away from the site-specific issue of this, because I think the fact that it's very unclear, and everybody out in the audience is speaking one side or the other, think that this is fait accompli because the moratorium is going to take away paid parking. I'm not there yet, I don't like paid parking because I don't like what happened in Portland, but I'm still open to, if there is a solution to paid parking, I think we need parameters around it, though. And, there's site plan issues, there's PIB issues, there's signage issues, there's all those things that we don't have in place yet to make this work the way it should if it's gonna, or if it's not, what do we do next? But this is, how you get an airing of this is to have a moratorium, and then to sit down and specifically discuss these things, and then we can get into the specifics once we're in the moratorium, and that we can, hash this out in some manner, I think.
Well, I mean,
But without it, I don't know how we,
why do you need a moratorium to hash this stuff out?
yeah,
do
well, because,
Just put it on the plan and
well, because then you can't draw a line and say, okay, then they can go back to having paid parking, and we don't get it straightened out. We can't impose signing afterwards. We can't impose any of these things afterwards, because they'll be a grandfathered, non-conforming use.
I think the other piece of it, I think that's you're right, a valid point is, any amount of applications could come in the meantime.
Well, I want to ask about that. I mean,
But the other piece is just the more general point that the moratorium points out is that, let me pull it back up. to consider if such uses should be permitted within the town. And that was really, I think, a center of the workshop discussion, and also part of, that kind of outreach portion, if a moratorium was established, is it's like, okay, there's a lack of standards if paid parking is desired, but is paid parking desired in the first place? And that's more of a community discussion, and we don't really have
property.
clarity on the ordinance.
It's
in-
private property.
Private property.
Very-
Which is
very
right,
hard for me to
you know, I
understand.
mean-
Well, our whole zoning ordinance regulates private property.
I mean,
But
going,
this is in an after the fact.
Yeah, but Mitch, almost every one of these properties has been through site plan review, and they're tied to certain things. So unless they go back and amend their site plan review, there has to be an amendment. If Beans wants to go to paid parking, or, Melissa across the street wants to go to paid parking, she has to go back to PRB and say, I want to amend my site plan review. This is the number of parking spaces I have. I want to gate my parking. So that's where we're at. That's how I see
We
it.
don't have any standards for what
Yeah, I
that's
think-
to do.
So,
what I'm taking away from the conversation is that there's a level of uncertainty that's not tenable. And I think it's unfortunate that it's come to this place. I take, it was Eric's point, echoed by others, that the town has had 5 years to address this issue, which may be true. I think is true by certain measures, I will say. There's always uncertainty in any policy change, and I think it has not come to this board with these specific concerns in those 5 years. So I'm sorry to say I'm not hearing about it in this way until tonight, or maybe as it's come up before the council the last couple of weeks. But so it's unfortunate that this is the way that we're going about it. I'm not sure, though, no matter what happens, it seems like there's a lot of uncertainty. Like the ordinance language is not clear enough to give guidance to code enforcement officers in the town. And so with or without a moratorium, it seems like there's a lot of uncertainty going forward. I think perhaps the best way to get some certainty is with a moratorium that is brief as possible, and then clarity as quickly as possible. So I guess, yeah, it's not a good solution. I don't think anybody's cheering for this.
Well-
I don't think it's like, oh, hooray, we're, caught. And with any zoning, I mean, there's always going to be somebody who makes out a little bit better than somebody else. And that's, I think, unfortunate, that we can't all win every time. So it's an unfortunate situation. But I still think that a moratorium is likely to be the best solution.
I think at this point it is, because then, now it's front and center, and it'll be dealt with.
I
And we'll
take
look-
some solace in the fact that you're saying that.
Well, I mean,
Of all people.
I'm not saying that lightly, because,
know.
I live down Route 1 South, and we've been highly impacted by zoning. I was told by Fred Reeder, I couldn't expand my house because it was a 100-foot setback, and my house was within a 100-foot setback. And there was no variances, which is illegal, but I still couldn't get a variance to expand my house. So, zoning is a double-edged sword. I mean, I don't like zoning rules as much as anybody. I oppose almost all of them because I think it is a taking, but I think there is no language, there is no clear language here. It didn't get appealed. I don't know if they went to the Board of Appeals. I don't know if they got the code guy to write them up an opinion they could appeal. So, I think it's ended up here, and we have to deal with it. And I think a moratorium gives us the space to deal with it. So, that's all.
I think with certain things, right, we identify a problem in the ordinance, and we know what the problem is. And it's really easy to bring an amendment forward to the board to just fix it. If it's, we had this definition that was a problem. But in this case, there's uncertainty around, one, what the goal is of the town. Like, we have this concept of paid parking, but we don't know for sure what people want. As Annie pointed out, some people are fully against the idea. Some people might be okay with it in certain situations. So one, we have to establish what people would want in the first place, and then go about the idea of actually developing whatever standards we end up landing on. So I think that's the difference as opposed to some of the other times where we just bring language to you, you know, right away without going through a process like
You know, the shared parking, the whole system was designed to create additional flexibility for business owners and property owners in town. And it was always built to be, or at least as I've understood it, going back, like I said earlier, to my very first meeting on the planning board, which was, I think, about 8 years ago at this point. And the discussion was always, Freeport was pursuing a park once strategy. That was the goal of the town, was park once, and it should be free parking. That's how I've always understood it. Those were the goals. I think it's, I certainly can't quote like a page number or anything from the 2011 comprehensive plan, but I'm pretty sure there's at least something that gestures to it there. I guess I could be wrong about that, so don't hold me to that, but I do know that it's come up many times. That's been a pursuit of the town, is park once and have it be free, stay as long as you want, and hopefully that supports other parts of downtown
But,
Freeport.
you know, things change, and
Yeah.
those are premium spots, and, you know.
Plus it was all.
Everything in the world has the levels of convenience, and you can pay for, you know?
Jeff Speck was specific about that paid makes sense in a.
So what I
areas.
remember from the presentation was their firm, and I'm sure this is situational and dependent on all kinds of things, so go watch the presentation if you really want to get the source information. But what I remember was paid parking is appropriate as street parking, and in parking lots, it's ideal if it's free, and that people, so the idea is that you're pricing convenience. So if you are running into CVS, or you're running in to get a sandwich at DeRozier's or something like that, you might be willing to pay a premium to park on the street, or for any other reason.
Situation.
Any other reason. So it's not that all paid parking is bad, it's that having paid parking, having, again, maybe speaks to a structure, having a structure within which some paid parking in certain parts of town
helps
serves
create-
certain missions, serves certain goals that the town has, and then having other parking options elsewhere in town. I think if we may be doing ourselves a disservice, speaking personally, if we have a patchwork across town of different, I think it's just confusing. You know, it's very hard to sign.
Well, I mean, it has to be signed and separated, but as Jeff Speck pointed out, if this particular, and I know we're not supposed to talk about this, if this lot were paid, there would always be available parking, because it wouldn't fill up if it were appropriately signed, and if you wanted to pay, so that was what he was talking about, that the best spaces could be, and it creates the scarcity, you know, it puts it in balance.
Because we also have to remember that shared parking was a concept because of the square footage rules of so many parking spots per square foot, and then so many, they had to be 600 feet from your front door. So the way that we amended that was the fact that shared parking could, if you threw your, because Freeport was built around a village, and we didn't have, you know, the main mall parking lot out back. If you threw yours into the pool, and everybody benefited from that, you would get a reduction in your square footage count. So that's,
Yeah, it's,
So,
I mean.
it was a mutual benefit at the time.
I think we've,
And as we say, things have changed, but it's a
we've
mutual
known for a
benefit.
long time that.
Maybe
the
we
park-
shouldn't have changed those parking requirements, you know?
Who knows at this
Yeah.
point? I mean, that's ancient history.
Yeah.
May
I
ask,
think, yeah, go
When was
ahead.
the last moratorium put in this town? I mean, when,
I
Has ever
don't
been done
know.
before.
Caroline, do you know?
Everybody's gonna look at Caroline.
Yeah.
Good
I mean,
question.
what, I want to know more about this.
I can
these
say
moratoriums.
I've gone through moratoriums in other communities that
Uh-huh.
I've worked in. It's not like the first one I've ever done.
Freeport's
but
had a couple
Freeport
of them.
specific, I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
we've had them for cannabis. When I
Yeah.
first got here, when we decided we needed to update our subdivision ordinances, or ordinance, we had a moratorium on subdivision. Believe we've had them on adult establishments. So we've had them for various things over time, but it's a land use tool that, like has been pointed out, you only use in certain situations, when you feel like there's an emergency, negative impact to the community, that you need time to address
Explain the
something.
emergency here then?
And-
I just can't get this
And there are
concept.
time limits associated with them. State law does not allow a municipality to go longer than 180 days for the first. Like, there's a renewal provision, but you can't go any longer. than
180 and 180, so they took the maximum allowed by the state in this proposal.
That is what is in the language that the council forwarded to you.
So can I bring up one other thing? There's two parts to this issue, I think. One is related to paid parking, yes or no, and the other is if paid parking, how. And the if paid parking, how seems like we need time. Like there is no signage standards. There's no, so I could understand us saying, okay, let's take 3 months, set those standards, and going down the road of allowing paid parking and saying we can't even allow it because we don't have the rules for how to allow it. So give us 3 months to allow it and then we could do it. Or are we putting on the table the banishment of paid parking in the town? And if we are, I'm wondering who brought that to the table and why are we discussing it? And I don't understand one other thing about the.
Well, I think the idea is that,
Why do you have to participate in paid parking? Why not just not pave your lot? Let it decay?
That's a specific.
Okay, so we'll let it sit there, but I don't understand, I mean, that seems like you could always remove yourself from everybody has that right, if they have sufficient parking.
Yeah, so
And then it's their property.
we've touched upon a little bit. We have a shared parking concept. You can be shared parking, you can be not shared parking. Like Sam got at, historically and currently, Freeport encourages participation in shared parking. And if you share, you have a lower requirement. I think for retail, it's 1 per 150 square feet. If you're not going to share, that's your choice. You want to restrict it to your own people, you have double plus
Right.
the requirement. Maybe to be helpful,
Rule.
Kyle, it would be good to kind of just walk through, again, like what's in the moratorium and what's being asked of them, so we're clear kind of what's in there for tonight. Because this was forwarded as a document from the council as is for you guys to weigh in on and make a recommendation.
yeah, I mean, I think the most accurate provision, H maybe, to determine the land use and other regulatory implications of the development and operation of paid parking. So that piece is getting at, okay, if there is a large-scale conversion of shared parking into paid parking facilities downtown, what are the impacts on the overall health and well-being of the downtown if that were to happen? Right, to consider if such uses should be permitted in the town. Right, we had the parking workshop, a lot of people came out and said they were against the idea of paid parking. So there's like this larger question, policy level question of, do people in the community want paid parking? Is there some compromise where, okay, maybe certain situations, but maybe not others, but those would want to get fleshed out. And then the final part, to consider any additional approvals or standards if you were going to allow paid parking. So, there's a few different pieces there, and they all, I think come with their own questions and steps to address them, and you would move through them kind of one by one to figure out, what was relevant for the next one. I mean, if the answer to the question is, the community as a whole decides, no, we don't want any paid parking, well then, you wouldn't have to spend time developing standards for paid parking. But, if it's a fast discussion to find out, oh no, we're okay with paid parking in this specific case, then, you make the standards for that specific case, maybe. But I think the larger point is, that the current ordinance, the current zoning ordinance doesn't mention paid parking. Like, it's just silent on that topic, and that's where.
So if it's silent on it, if it's not permitted, it's prohibited. Am I correct?
Why would it be prohibited?
Because it's not permitted. If it's not permitted in your zoning ordinance, it's prohibited. Because that's the way zoning works. Like down where I am, it doesn't permit a gas station, or it does permit a gas station. Whatever's listed in the zoning ordinance for permitted uses in that zone, if they're not listed, they're prohibited. That's just so-
I think that's,
A
that
lot of
is,
times it's, yeah.
That's correct, then the
Interpreted,
existing one is not.
Again, that's not, you know.
We can't do
shouldn't be getting
specific
into
things, but it's just, we're
enforcement
going down this rule of, we're talking about paid parking in town,
Well, it is.
and if it's not permitted, it's prohibited. And
But
that's
I think
why,
that's where that's where
that's
the
why, that's why in my end of town, I fought hard for every use on my property I could
You
get.
need a moratorium if that's the case.
clarifying question for you, Kyle.
Because maybe we do want to, that's what the moratorium would be for, is that, you know, to remove the uncertainty either way. Because sometimes things get left out of ordinances purposely because you just don't want to allow them, so you don't speak to them. But sometimes something could have been left out because it just wasn't thought about at the time.
Right.
It wasn't addressed properly. And that's really what the time here would be used to figure out.
When I was a kid, there was moratorium on gas stations in the downtown. We had 7 or 8 gas stations in the downtown. Now, I don't think under the ordinance, a gas station is allowed in the downtown.
I don't believe so.
So,
Certainly aren't
you
any.
couldn't build one now because it's not permitted.
Under section 1, I'm looking at the ordinance, the draft moratorium ordinance language. In section 1, there's definition, there's 2 definitions. One is parking facility and one is paid parking facility. Am I correct? There is no definition of paid parking facility in the zoning ordinance? Is that accurate?
Right, both of these definitions are for the purpose of the
Just for the
moratorium.
purpose
They
of the
are
moratorium.
not in existence in our zoning.
They are not a
ordinance.
reference to the.
Nothing is here is a reference to
Yep.
anything.
It's not a reference to the zoning ordinance. So there is no, and now I'm trying to find it, which I probably shouldn't even bother. But there's no, and I mean, I think that's, again, we keep coming back, for me, it keeps coming back to the lack of clarity, and that is the issue and the purpose of a moratorium, as difficult as it may be. It's alphabetical, I'm in the right place, I'm almost there.
Yeah, I mean, if you control F paid parking in the ordinance, there's, you know, no result.
Yep, Kyle's much better with a computer than I am. Right. Okay, we've discussed this one quite a bit. At this point, does anybody have further questions or feel like they are sitting on the fence for one reason or another and want to talk about it? Or are we ready do people feel like they know which way they're gonna vote?
I do.
I'm still trying to understand what happens if we do nothing, and if the council obviously does nothing as well. And then there'd be no rights to.
I think the only risk
No
there,
rules.
the only risk is that somebody could come in and put parking on lots and lots of spaces. I think that's really the biggest risk.
No, they can't because we don't have a definition for it. They'd have to go ask for a
think
permit, and we
it's-
don't have a definition for it.
Yeah, the risk is continued uncertainty and,
Right.
and something.
Oh, violations.
And I think there's, yeah, and getting dragged into,
Yeah, I mean, you'd have staff decisions on applications that could be appealed because, you know, there's no real clarity in the
Nothing in the
ordinance to
ordinance
speak
to
to it.
define it.
I mean,
yeah, I think it's possible to be in this place, regret being in this place. Feel like we need to move forward one way or another and not be happy about the way that that's how I feel anyway.
Yeah, me too.
It doesn't mean I'm like excited, I mean,
No.
like I said earlier, it's not that this is a good situation, it's that
Very much, but I hear you,
it's the best of worst options. You cannot speak from there. You can speak potentially from the podium. Are we close? Yeah, we don't, the public hearing is not open, but we will, I think, allow
Yeah, you just let them talk.
one more comment, or at least
I
one more.
appreciate you letting me talk, and I promise it's going to be something that bears directly on the planning board and your role.
You need to identify yourself. Sorry.
I'm
There's so many
Jed
rules.
Standen.
I understand. Sorry, say it again.
I'm Jed Standen. I'm the vice president of the Historical Society here in town. What I'm hearing a lot is talk of kind of the town getting their ducks in a row, right? And what I'm hearing also is that the only risk, if this moratorium didn't go into effect, would be continued uncertainty. And to me, that just doesn't sound like the kind of serious harm that a moratorium was designed to address. And, you know, I don't see, I mean, I hear that the town needs more time to figure things out, and I understand that. But I don't see of all the discussion that's been going on tonight, I don't see how there's serious harm to the public or anybody else in this instance. You know, if somebody doesn't want to pay for parking, it's been established that we have a surplus of parking here in town already. So it's a matter of convenience, and that just, to me, that doesn't rise to the level of serious harm. And that's all I have to say. I think Eric and Mary kind of covered the Historical Society's perspective in all this very well. So thank you for letting me speak.
Yeah, Eric, you have.
I just want to respond to some of the questions that you're asking, to point out, partially
Can you
in
help us
response.
keep it away? We're
Yeah,
struggling to
I'm not
not
going to talk about.
think about your
I'm
problem.
not going to talk about on property, I'm talking about the zoning ordinance and
Okay,
and paid
thanks.
parking in general. So just to clarify, is it allowed, is it not allowed, is it named? The town attorney stood at this podium and said, there is nothing in the ordinance that prohibits paid parking in Freeport. They looked at the entire zoning ordinance, the parking, traffic. There is nothing currently that prohibits paid parking in Freeport, according to the town attorney. It is referenced, as many things, deep within the ordinance language in the identification. So first of all, there is no difference when you say an approved use is a parking lot or a parking area or a parking structure. None of those are defined as paid or free or shared or anything. It's just those are uses. In the definition of shared parking, if you look at that, it says this is what shared parking means. And here are examples of not shared parking. Not shared parking includes a lot that charges people to park. So the zoning ordinance imagines the possibility of a lot that charges people to park, and all it says is that that would not be included in the shared parking pool. So that language is there.
Somebody want to make a motion, one way or another? Any other thoughts or questions, comments?
Mitch, you started to say something.
Do we have language here to make a
Very
motion?
confused, yeah, I don't know if there's
So
language, but
I put a motion in the staff report, just
Right, here it
be sure to, I put in parentheses a couple options in two places, so choose the one that gives you the motion that you want it to give.
Right.
So for instance, if you wanted to be in favor of the moratorium, you would recommend to the council that the town's existing ordinances do not adequately address, and that the moratorium is necessary. And if you wanted to make a motion the other way, you could say that the.
Can I ask more questions? So if what Eric just said is correct, there is no lack of clarity in the ordinance.
We don't have
about
that here in front of us.
Permission to have a paid parking lot. That's what he just said. And if that's, I would like to know if that's true. If that's true, I still think there may be a lack of clarity about signage requirements.
Just about everything
Right,
else.
I mean,
about
About
it.
everything
everything
else. But everything else should be on a 90-day. We should say in 90 days, well, this is going to happen, because there's no reason that it's not going to happen. It's allowed to happen. We don't think there's good rules for how it should happen. So in 90 days, let's figure out how to make it happen.
But
And
again-
if somebody wants to bring a proposal to ban paid parking in town, that's a whole, I mean, that's a different issue, and maybe that's, I mean, I heard the public consensus wants to do that. So I don't want to stand in the way of, I just want to know that I don't know that it's right, or fair, or needed.
So I'll say that that's how the moratorium is worded, though, is to examine that question of whether paid parking should be permitted at all. So even if,
Well, but
you
why
want.
is that, why is it coming up now when we've had paid parking for 2 years in
Because I think even
plain
if you
sight?
can interpret the ordinance that way, That's the policy
It's
discussion.
been interpreted, it's a fact on the ground. There's precedent.
And
Yeah.
we had the workshop, and a lot of people came out and voiced the opinion, so
That they don't want to, so maybe there's a,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not an issue until it is, and
Right.
it is now, and now we have to do something about it, and we have to figure out the best way to do something about it, and
I mean, here in the staff memo, we see all the permitted uses for VC1, parking lot, parking structure, parking area, and how many parking spaces for, room, 25 units and all that stuff, but it doesn't say paid for parking lot, this-
but if shared parking says that a non-shared includes paid,
but I think that speaks, I mean, I don't
don't see
necessarily
that.
disagree with that one interpretation that says I mean, what I heard Eric say, I think correctly, is that the ordinance language imagines the possibility of paid parking, which is fine and true, but that doesn't indicate any additional
precedent
clarity.
says that it's okay, because nobody said it wasn't 2
But I-
years ago.
Right, but there's still no additional, I mean, like, I think for the PRB, I mean, nobody is from the PRB here, but I think they, like, if a site plan came to them that said, we intend to put a bunch of paid parking, and I mean, they would have no ability to make a finding about it based on ordinance language. Like,
right.
there's additional,
And just because it happened doesn't mean it's not a violation.
yeah, that's also true.
Right,
But we can't speculate about,
No, we can't.
about
The
individual
church could be
cases.
in violation.
So, I hear the concern about the timeline, certainly.
the chair,
I,
advice.
Can I just speak to the timeline? I can, regardless of what the motion is, if the motion was in favor of the moratorium, I always make a report to the council on the planning board's discussion. So beyond.
You use the word tortured?
Beyond just the final vote on the recommended motion, I can add in there, the board had a strong leaning towards, moving this as quickly as possible. I can add in that type of language outside of the motion, so the council, if they don't have a chance to watch this meeting or conversation, can still get a sense of the board's desire to make this more of as fast a moving thing as possible, if it does go down that road.
He wants to go.
I think we gotta make a recommendation one way or another.
Yep.
I think regardless, at this point, the council will get the drift of our conversation, and that we are, I think, concerned about the particulars, and also
Who should make the motion?
recognize the
I will, I just don't know which one we're reading here.
uncertainty.
Do I have the right page? Oh, I don't have that one.
It's the bottom of the middle page,
Yeah, bottom of page 2.
And I think
Kyle's report,
Bottom?
there it is, right down there.
and then just to, as Kyle said, to make
All right.
note of which way, and I suspect I know which way you feel, Andrew.
Well, I think at this point, it's, for me sitting up here, it's the only way out, is to have a moratorium and hash this out. Now it's come to a head, and we have to decide how it's gonna be handled. And that's what we do here. So, I'd like to make a motion, be it ordered that Freeport Planning Board recommends the town council that the town's existing ordinances do not adequately address paid parking facilities in the downtown, and the paid parking facility moratorium ordinance is necessary to allow for sufficient time to evaluate existing ordinances, consider the implications of paid parking facilities in the downtown, and if such uses should be permitted, and develop any necessary town ordinance amendments.
Do I hear a second? Don't all jump at once.
It'll be the first time I didn't get a second.
I mean, if somebody's gonna vote for it, they better second it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether I can or not legally.
Oh, yeah, are you allowed?
I guess I'll second it. Something needs to be done here.
All right, we have a second. All in favor? I honestly don't know what happens when there's a tie.
Motion fails. Tie vote, motion
Oh,
fails.
did you vote?
Oh, no, I'm voting opposed.
You're voting opposed.
Tie vote, motion fails.
Okay.
Well, can we just Can we
We
get
have
all
to
those
have
in
a-
favor?
I mean, we could do a motion the other way, and it's also going to fail.
Well, then the council gets to figure out what to do with it.
There you go.
Good luck to them.
Sharon, did you get the vote?
I have 3 ayes and 1 opposed, which would be Mitch.
Yeah, we didn't really formally.
Yeah, we
Can
didn't do
get
it for, yeah, sorry.
all those in favor?
All those in favor, again, and opposed.
3-3.
All right. Stay tuned. All right, item number 5 is a continued discussion of the design review ordinance update with a combined review of, continued review of a text-only version of the draft ordinance language. Does anyone want a minute to like I want a minute to get a drink of water. Is that all right?
Yeah, good idea.
But we should come right back, because I know last time
We left off
What page?
basically at the preservation stuff.
Contributing buildings, yeah.
Yes. And so I hope that preservation people don't leave.
Contributing buildings.
Yeah, this would be a
That's
good
what's,
discussion.
that's what's left.
Okay.
What am I smelling here? If I didn't hear you clearly. Oh, no worries. Do you want my copy? I mean, you can only use those 2, but I just,
So, it's right here, yes, it's just
I'm gonna circle the page. I'll circle.
What page are we on, Mitch?
page 16.
16.
16, that's where we stopped, wasn't it?
That's where we stop.
Oh, hold on, Sharon. Here, there. So just the pages that I've circled. Thank you very much. You're welcome. No worries.
So, my first question is about contributing buildings. Is it very clear what they are?
Standards.
Well, they were the,
We had the As and
A's,
Bs, we sort
Bs.
of talked about this, but this is.
We had As and Bs and Cs, and we were gonna go to contributing or non-contributing instead of
Right,
A,
but
B, and
who's-
C.
And who decides?
Don't know?
Because if you have a contributing building, then all of a sudden you can't do nothing. And.
well, they're already
And Freeport is not a historic town. I mean, they're a historic building.
We should
Yes.
have a historic preservation.
Well, that's why,
I agree. Mitch, I think.
I don't even know if we should.
I think the way this is a design standard for the downtown, should have nothing to do with historic. Historic preservation, we should take care of an historic preservation agreement.
But we don't have it, and so they're saying we at least have it downtown.
Right,
That's what this
right.
is basically a
But we gotta get
historic
away from this,
preservation.
like, this is like, okay, we'll do it here, but like, we gotta get away from this, we have to have, we do this throughout the town, I think. We're gonna
Do
take
you
historic
really
pre-
want to do it without?
Yes or no?
I mean,
I mean, historic, I am too, but.
There you go.
Freeport is.
You got off the five.
You know, I mean,
but who-
Not really.
What would
Days you
be
win,
the,
some days you
so
lose.
South Freeport, I live near South Freeport, it's beautiful.
Yeah, right.
It's historic, you'd hate to see, but if somebody wanted to tear one of those down, first of all, it's highly unlikely.
Well,
because
lager
most
is
of the
probably,
people
it's a
walk
word,
their houses
right?
Because they're.
Doesn't, yeah,
The other one I
So
don't know.
Why would they tear it down?
I don't
Because
know.
it's infested,
But, I mean, there's many
because they have
pages that
reasons.
was, Sharon. You did good.
And so this
Hey.
puts no reason, the minute you have one of these buildings, you can't change things. Well, I worry we're fixing Freeport in time. If it's truly a,
And you get the little things, so you
truly a
can listen and listen and
I
listen.
wish we could define.
I remember
the
days when I
true
did
relics and
dictation.
Save them.
Holy.
But
It's
the way
rough.
you save them is you buy them. I mean, the historic preservation,
right.
that's to save the building.
Exactly.
If
You have a
care so
life.
much.
Exactly. And you have things
what
that
are
are
we gonna
broken
do,
down, all
collect a whole
kinds
bunch
of
of
things.
buildings for, you know, I mean.
But if not, then why can't they put a big picture window in the middle of an old building?
Oh, no.
I don't like that. I just am worried about,
Recent? Yeah.
are we fixing it in time? And are we, if they're really relics, or what if they're just like from the 40s and somebody thinks they're nice, but like, they're not really special?
Right. I mean, it's like a lot of these places have their pedigree in a way.
So life is a
Like they
little-
got, you know, they had something that, you know, they tie
hope it
back to
gets
history.
better. You don't need
And
any more
those are the
broken
ones that I think are,
things.
you know, maybe more interesting to certainly, I mean, I'm in like
Sorry, I'm
an
just
1850s
opening up the,
farmhouse, right? But it doesn't really feel like it. Farmhouse.
No worries.
1790s.
How are you, Caroline?
1850s, it doesn't feel like it.
It's just summer.
Come in here, make me, that would,
Warm.
That's-
You having fun?
that's what you're thinking.
I don't
Yes.
know. I mean, that's
Yeah.
one of those
So
that you really wonder, what's the community think? What are the affected?
Well, every time every time I ride home at night,
My North Towns
see at
do
least
have them.
one, and it's like, and they're just looking at you.
It makes
I'm
you
like, you
wanna-
can stay right where you are, don't come to the road.
It's certainly, they all involve restrictions.
Aw, that's kind of disappointing.
Carolyn,
Yes.
before we even start this conversation, can you help us understand what would be a contributing building? I know we've had this conversation repeatedly, but this affects a lot of buildings, and I don't know which buildings it affects.
A and B, so,
It's all those
Mostly
that,
the A and B. A couple might have been like kicked out. Yeah, so when you look at the map.
it'd be A and B unless kicked out, and and a property owner could appeal and say, I'm not an A or B?
Yeah, so what we did in
And what are
20
the standards of A and B?
So in 29, so that's the old ordinance. We had A, B, and C. And so it's a very simplified way would be, if you look at Freeport, when we originally established it, design review 1, and then when we did 2, we established the buildings as A and B, and A, B, and C. A was the most historically and architecturally significant based upon its appearance, might have been who lived there, if a significant event occurred, and we had a data sheet for each one to kind of support that. C would have been
That was A and B?
A and B. A is the most important. I say B is somewhat important. And C might have been so significantly altered or a new building that,
So C is just not, is not relevant now.
yeah, it doesn't really.
So, but
state-
B.
So then, what we did in 2019, I believe it was, is we had money. So we hired an architectural historian to go out and re-inventory all of the A and B buildings. And so kind of the philosophy of the boards at that time and kind of the more modern day approach was to go to a contributing and non-contributing. Either important or not, no more like the 3 levels. So they did that. I don't have the percentages off the top of my head. We have that
They
information.
kicked some Bs out.
There were some, yeah, some A or Bs that were so altered, or some have been destroyed, like they're no longer there. So you saw a map and it showed an A, but it was gone. The other thing we did not do is we did not inventory the Cs. So there could be some C buildings that were categorized wrong at some point or haven't been inventoried.
But
So.
They've been improved.
There's no
They could have
plan
been
to
approved.
re-inventory them, so they would be excused from.
So there's
page
no plan to
16 on.
re-inventory. They did, I think, flag a couple that we could go back and look at, but we haven't gotten through just even the bulk of the ordinance at this point. Part of this process would have to be a public review to notify people, to give them the opportunity to look at the data sheets and make sure they accurately reflect their properties.
Okay.
And I can show you at another meeting a sample of one of those if it would be helpful.
Yeah, so I
Kyle
got
has boxes
one more
in
question.
his office.
So I'm assuming that the As were very clearly historic,
Yes.
but the Bs, I guess what I'm worried about in this whole thing that's gonna follow is that some building from the 40s that isn't really historically significant and has been altered, but maybe not altered since the 40s, and somebody likes that and wants to keep that, and I'm wondering,
So
are
we
gonna-
would have thought that would have been captured when we updated the inventory.
So presumably, all the As and Bs are really special and really shouldn't be changed.
Mostly. But again, I do know like of a couple outbuildings, and if Eric's still here, I'm sure he has knowledge too. Like there's been a couple old barns that were A or B, or it's not in design review anymore, but the old Billard Hall down on Lower Main Street that got moved. There have been A and B buildings that just are no longer here. So those would just be fully recategoried. But yeah, the A and B we should have captured if there were historical value there.
And in the current design
Still.
ordinance, the design ordinance, does it say that A and B buildings can't be changed?
You can change things. We have those 10 standards for compatibility, which is kind of why we're here, because we hear they're so subjective. So they can, and again, it's not it's this weird combination. It's not a historic preservation ordinance, but we do have hints of it in there, and we do have a delay if you want to demolish all or part of an A or B.
So we understand
currently.
about the delay, but this, what follows now says that basically if it's an A or B, you can't change the look. You can repair it, but you gotta repair it exactly the same way, and even.
The new ordinance is leaning more into separating the two things, whereas like the current one just has one set of standards for everything. The new one is like trying to differentiate the two.
Well, I'm trying to understand, are we adding restrictions to these buildings?
Well, I think you
beyond-
could have made, the board could have made all of the types of requirements in here for the A and B buildings, but they would have just had to have been specific about them themselves because it's not listed out clearly in the current
I mean, they would have
ordinance.
just said it's not compatible to change, but now it's being very specific that says when replacing the new material must match in the design and the texture and the.
And so that's what we want to go
Is that in there
through
today?
line by line.
No, but that's the point. Nothing is really in the current one. It's just these 10 very
Well, so we are
vague, short
creating a
things.
historic preservation ordinance.
We are creating nuclear regulations. It's not historic preservation because we're still not preserving buildings in their entirety. You can
Right,
still
right, you can still
take them
demolish.
down. You can still alter them. We're trying to articulate more clearly through text and graphics how that can be done and what is appropriate, which is why we had an architectural historian work on this. We met with stakeholders that get input from the Historical Society, businesses, all sorts. I think if there's something in here that you're like, why are we regulating that, or do we want to, or if it's important, we can either talk about it, or, since other than our experts in the back of the room, we don't have our architectural historian tonight, because you guys wanted to go through the text first, so we would flag them for questions.
And there would be a process of that A and B being reviewed and public hearing.
Yeah, we would have to have a public process of the new
And
designations.
say, this is the
Being
ones that
reviewed.
have been declared, and you could argue individually.
Yeah, and there
don't do
could have
that.
been more changes since those were done in 2019. You know, everyone was doing home projects
You're
during
prepared for
COVID.
the hearings on each individual property if 50% of the property owners object to you
We would
classifying them
probably-
so?
We would work, once we see where you land with this, we'll work through what that looks like. But like when we did color, for example, we sent letters to everyone that was impacted. We gave them the opportunity to come in, meet with staff, go through that, through a process. We didn't all sit down here and go through every property together. We could, but that's not how we did it before, just to be efficient.
So just for reference, that's the current map with the A, B, and C buildings. Everything in yellow is the C, the red or blue are the A and Bs, just for like a rough percentage of,
That
in
helps.
design review, the breakdown.
I think, for me, I'm thinking about this as totally separate from a historical preservation ordinance. And I don't, obviously we don't have that, but I still think about this whole document as creating very basic, and we talked about this last time, but very basic guardrails around design in a very specific part of town. And I don't want it to be too broad or far-reaching. And I think if there's a desire for a historic preservation ordinance, I think that can and should fit around this in the future. But I think I see them as maybe related, but different goals. So the goal here is to create some guardrails around design in the downtown district, kind of regardless of what the building is. And then, of course, there's some additional weight put to buildings that are contributing or have been deemed contributing. But I still see all of it through the sort of basic guardrails lens. Like, let's just try to uphold a very basic standard in town, in the downtown, to try to encourage the sorts of buildings that support the sort of town that we want to see. Like, it's all connected to me.
All right, do we want to dive back in?
Yep.
So section 8, this is for alterations and additions to contributing buildings. So 8.1 is the general standards. Mitch, I know you mentioned last time that you might have fewer comments. I don't know how other people feel. Do we want to go standard by standard, or do we want to take 8-1 and go through it that way? Does anyone have comments on anything A through E in the general standards there?
I got a question about the first one. It just seems like it's more complicated than it needs to be. It says deteriorated architectural features should be repaired rather than replaced. I mean, if it's deteriorated, how can it be repaired? I mean, shouldn't it just be that it's to replace with the same feature, you know?
Same feature, same type of materials.
That's right,
Yeah.
that's right. Instead of saying, it just doesn't make much sense to me. Deteriorated architectural features should be repaired. Well, if it's deteriorated, maybe it can't be repaired, but it should be replaced with the same, or you know.
Yep. I think this is another one.
Smith that, but I get the view of it, but I don't think that tells us what we need to do.
I think it's another one like we talked about last time too, in the general section, where as we go through the more specific sections, talking about storefronts, porches and entrances, roofs, doors, it'll probably have something to that effect for each specific one. So we should probably look at if a general overall standard is.
So when we get to C, I don't know what triggers C. Says in here, if it had vinyl siding on it in the past, it should be duplicated. And so do you take the vinyl siding off? Or what triggers you replacing the vinyl siding with something else? I'm just, to me, I'm reading down through this and I'm trying to figure out, I know where we're going with this, but I don't know if this gets us here. But to me, it looks confusing, that's all. Doesn't seem clear.
Yeah, it seems like if there's a general comment that is made in the ordinance up at the top, not giving it a letter would be clearer, like just saying the purpose, general, like the purpose of this section is to describe that how architectural features should be
So we did
maintained.
flag that at the last meeting. We went through it here and we just kind of held to finish. So we did flag that to go through each section and look at those and strike them if it's not really a standard, or if you like the idea of a general and then renumbering or lettering, whatever underneath, we could do that. So preference of the board would be taken if anyone has feelings. Or if you don't care, we'll just go through and kind of clean it up.
Jim?
I mean, D sounds reasonable. I mean, that makes a clear statement.
I just got worried about, you saw some of my notes, but when you say where possible, or as reasonably possible, or strongly encouraged, strikes me as tricky. Just like, what does that mean, and where possible says who?
So I think that language is going to be more prevalent in this section than it was previously because of the historic nature of it. So, it's encouraging that more of that repairing of older features, but, it can't guarantee.
Well, that's why you might want to put in the general, that there's a goal to try to save what's possible.
Yeah, I think that's a goal we all want.
Right, but it's not necessarily a rule. The rule is if you replace it, you got to do it right.
So save existing materials and architectural features as much as possible.
Also, when you use granite, should that be natural stone? Is there a reason why you specify granite and exclude other stones?
Well, granite's local, common.
Local.
Prevalent.
So, I mean, if everybody likes it, that's fine.
Well, there
are other stones.
Also does have a such as.
Yeah. Oh, it does say such as?
We can add if other.
Traditional materials such as, okay, that sort of gets you there.
Covers you.
Yeah. I mean, I think generally the new materials should match the material, back up in B. New material should match the material being replaced in composition, design, texture, dimensions, reveal, or other visual qualities. I feel like that goes a long way towards saying
Yep.
This is like, the spirit is, it looks the same. It doesn't necessarily have to
Right.
be the same, but it should look the same.
If they had
And
cement
that-
clapboards back then, they'd probably be using them too.
Yeah, totally, yeah. Yep. Yep.
It sounds like B, D, and E are largely, the board is okay with.
Yeah, C, appropriate, I think, there's C, there's the word appropriate, third line up from the bottom. I would put in historically similar. I mean,
The other part of
appropriate to who?
C, that gives me pause is the porch. I think it's pretty unclear, like, I could imagine if somehow a photo of my house surfaced that had a porch on it, and
Yeah.
somewhere said, and I could imagine a situation where the PRB says, well, we're not gonna give you a building permit to put a new garage door on until you replicate that porch on the front. It's like, well, I don't really wanna spend $25,000 on a porch right now. Like, why should I have to do that? I don't think that's likely, but it does bring up to me that I think that's a little more macro than I think we wanna go with
There
this.
was a house down on Bow Street, they had a woman tried to get a porch on her house, and they had an awful fight over which, was the door gonna be in the center? Because the house door wasn't in the center, so, you know, it got to be, poor lady got dragged out for quite a while over her, you know.
So were you,
I-
you thinking deleting the first sentence of C, or?
I will say, like, to go along with Mitch's point about applicability with C, that, I mean, as the potential staff person reading this, I also worry about the applicability, you know, because really, the design review certificate for contributing buildings applies for any alteration and addition, kind of like our current ordinance, where any material change that's visible from a public right-of-way triggers the need for design review. All right, so someone's doing something on the roof, but now that makes them have to build a porch that used to be there. Or is it only if they're working in that space
I think-
where the porch would have been that they have to put in that feature, so.
I think it means
I do-
if you're replacing
Right.
a missing feature.
You can't make somebody put
Yeah,
on a porch. 'Cause
exactly.
you're gonna
Yeah,
go
no, I don't,
See, there's a wording problem, it's just a language problem.
So it, like, we're not saying you have to put it on, but if you're replacing.
Yeah,
Yes.
So if you're adding on a porch,
When- or-
and there used to be a porch.
it should look similar.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
just clarify.
So if you're replacing a missing architectural feature, such as,
If you
Right,
push,
but if you don't choose to, let's just say that you have a door, and it used to have a lintel over it and
Fan or whatever.
pediments next to it or something, and that's not there. It was removed long ago. Then you don't have to put that on, right? Or was such as a feature that was previously removed.
I don't think you should be recreating these buildings if they.
Yeah, I don't know what-
mean, whatever condition they're in now is that, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
you can improve it the way you, in the directions you want to, but you shouldn't be forced to put on extras.
Stuff that used to be there, that's.
porch might
So
have
I
been
think
about
it's-
50 years ago.
I think it's
Right.
fine, I think we have a majority of you that don't want to just require that, it's if you're replacing it, we want you to be,
If it's there
Historically
and you're
similar.
replacing it,
If it's there and
Yeah.
you're replacing it, do it the right way.
Working on it, it's gotta look
That's
right.
all.
okay, so I have those changes and see.
And then, so the only other one in one there was A. Was there a feeling that 1A should just be deleted or amended?
well, the next,
Yeah, do you think the rest clarifies it?
I think B says it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think we need A.
Just get
I
rid
would
of-
just, I mean, in general, I think it would be appropriate to just format these general statements. I know this is under general, but there are other situations, right, where we've had like the numbered subsection, and then the first letter is like a more general statement. It almost seems like finding a way to incorporate that first letter in the sort of description of the numbered statement. So like for this one, it would say general colon or general, hyphen or whatever dash. And then the, deteriorated architectural features should be repaired.
So I flagged that as either make a statement or strike it. So I think
Yeah.
what we'll do to make the format of the ordinance work is Kyle and I will go back, look at the other ones you flagged and be like, okay, do we want,
Yep.
did they want to keep enough to keep this statement format, or are we just going to strike them?
Yep.
So if we'll do that, we'll go back and look. It will not come back as A.
Great.
Okay. Other comments on that section?
Still one?
Yeah, 8.1.
I'm ready for 2.
All right. 8.2, storefronts. Freeport's commercial buildings with intact storefronts capture its small-town character and should be retained. An altered storefront that has taken on significance may also be retained, or if physical or photographic evidence exists, returned to its historic appearance.
I think that's great because it gives the choice.
Maybe, yeah, maybe fine. My
Where-
question about
where are you
B,
there?
B,
The wording?
2B. What if you have to provide barrier-free access and you can't do it without lousing up the storefront?
Then you can modify it to accommodate barrier-free access, right?
No, I mean, it's
Oh,
like I'm
as
trying
long
to
as, all right.
flip,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
trying to, I have to flip, you have to flip the statement. This saying you're allowed to modify them for barrier-free access, but what if you have to modify them?
Sorry, I missed what you're.
All right, it's on 2B.
Yep.
So 2B says, you're basically trying to keep the storefronts the way they are. And 2B says, yeah, but if you have to modify it for,
The
they may be modified for barrier-free access as long as the design intent of the storefront is maintained. And my question is, what if you have to modify it for barrier-free access and you can't do that? What if that's not possible?
I'm struggling to imagine a situation where it wouldn't at least be theoretically possible to create a barrier-free, I mean, you might have to tear it apart and do it again, which would be a bummer, but a barrier-free, like the parts of the design intent that would dominate the feel of it, like side lights and transom windows or whatever it has, should be possible to recreate with
You
a
have
barrier-free door.
building that has, steps going up to it.
I think this is, I recall this one like being one of the photo evidences that they use in
okay.
I think that's a difference with, so to me, barrier-free access means a door that doesn't have a threshold that you have to step over, as opposed to like an access ramp. So that would be something different. Like an access ramp is not part of the barrier-free.
I recall seeing an image
my head.
of a storefront, right, with the, the recessed, entryway and the stairs leading up to it, and then a version where the stairs weren't there, but it maintaining the same kind of, like what Sam was talking about. Like
So if you have to,
feel
But
of
in
the
that
overall-
building, that was possible to do, but in some other building, you might have to tear off the front steps that were historically significant to put a ramp up. Anyway, I just think it's possible that you could come to a situation where that is not possible.
I mean, you can always add, to any of these, right? You can always add, as long as the design intent of the storefront is maintained to the maximum extent
To the
practicable.
extent possible, to the maximum,
I-
maximum extent possible,
think
that's
but
common. I think-
maximum may not be what you want.
Right. But it
but
would
I
be
think this
on,
is a special case with barrier-free, like with accessibility requirements. I feel like that gets kind of special
Yeah.
treatment, and
That-
it's not
that-
uncommon, and I think,
Okay.
as I suspect you are too, Mitch, like more likely to give additional leeway.
Correct, that's what I'm trying
Yeah,
to do, is
yeah,
make sure
exactly.
that you
Right, where-
can do it,
where-
and what if you sort of screw up,
Where normally we might be going toward more objectivity, here, it's okay to allow additional flexibility such that
That's-
accessibility demands
that's
can
the
be
point.
met.
as long as you say it's maintained to the to the best possible maximum, that gets you there.
So in 2 itself, we have the second sentence here, an altered storefront that has taken on significance may also be retained, but if we find a photograph from 150 years ago, do we have to go back to that? Is that what I'm reading?
no, I think it says
It says, or if physical or photographic evidence exists,
I think it
return
means
to
you-
its existence appearance.
It means you can keep what's there, or if you like, you could modify it to the previous.
See, I didn't see that, but
yeah, I think,
it should say, you may go back to
You
the.
may do this, or you may do that,
But it
but you
says
can't
or-
come up with option 3, the modern look.
Well,
Mirrored
but
glass.
I don't see where it's, I don't see, I look at it as one or the other. An altered storefront that has taken on significance may be retained, or if physical photographic evidence exists, return to, it should say, it seems like it should say may return to its existing.
May be returned to its
yeah,
historic.
we can
it
add
may
a
be
second may to
returned.
clarify that
Yeah,
it's.
because it says it's like it's either one or the other, and they could force you to do one or the other.
It's right before, if you just said may be returned to.
That's right, that's what it should say.
It's fine.
Not that they get to pick one that you can't control. They can say, oh, you can keep the old one, or you gotta go back to 100
Is
years.
she making notes for you?
I'm writing them
Okay.
down for, yeah.
Okay.
Caroline's writing them down in a working document that we have, but she just had to step out, so.
Yep, no
but
worries.
have
I just
the
want to make
changes.
sure that
Yep.
she wasn't getting left behind.
All right, so that's the 2 as a whole, and B, 2A, where any comments, retain and preserve storefronts that contribute to the overall character and form, contributing commercial buildings, including display windows, transoms, mid-cornices, recessed entries, bulkhead panels, and other functional or decorative features.
So was a contributing commercial building a category of its own?
No, it would just be a contributing building, so that would be the classification. And then, because we're only talking about storefronts,
Okay,
it would be that's
Commercial
used for
building.
some commercial use.
okay, yeah.
All right, if no comments, I guess we'll move on to C. Design of new storefront entrances must match the original historic storefront or be based on typical historic storefronts found on other contributing buildings of a similar age, style, and type. Details may be simplified if exact details and profiles are undocumented.
What's
How
the
would you
definition
know?
of historic?
How would you know if those details would, they're not documented? I don't like that last sentence. I don't know why it's there.
I think it's trying to allow additional flexibility, but I think it's,
It should be, I think it still should, but it should be said differently.
Go for it.
I don't know, man.
Well, so Mitch, to answer your,
This morning. My brain is done.
undocumented, if exact details and profiles are undocumented or unavailable. I mean, a lot of times, old profiles are not available unless you go get a custom made, which is difficult and expensive.
We should have had snacks.
You know,
You think?
a good spot for
I just need to put it back.
historically similar.
I'm,
What was
yeah,
that?
details may be simplified if exact to, yeah, I don't,
I mean, you see, I think you just say something about, you know, if details are unavailable, it should just be historically similar, or, you know, or something
good.
along those lines.
Yeah.
If documentation is not available, this is C, last sentence.
since
Details.
Mitch stepped out, maybe we should throw the word character in there.
Yeah. Visually compatible
Yeah,
character.
Visually compatible. Yeah, I think I like the spirit of it. It's just a way to find the,
It's right, that's right. All right, 3.
all right, we can take a look at the wording of the last, but the rest of it was mostly just that last sentence.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, 3, porches and entrances. So porch or entry stoop is often a primary character-defining feature of a front facade and should be retained. New modified or replacement porch or stoop should be in character with the existing building in terms of scale, materials, and detailing. The removal of a porch stoop or any of the individual features detracts both from the character of its building and the streetscape of the town and should be avoided. All right, so A, porches and stoops should be preserved in their historic forms to the greatest extent possible. Any comments there?
How far back do we go for porches?
contributing. If they're on a contributing building, then.
Well, I'm just wondering, you know, you look at all these buildings, and there was a time when people started adding porches. You know, it might have been a, you know, early 1800s house, and at the end of the 1800s, they added a porch, you know, and it's really a, you know, Greek revival, or whatever it is, you know, a colonial, and somebody
There's
stuck a porch on.
there's actually a little provision in, I think it's in the Freeport Overlay District that encourages adding porches and gives a setback reduction, sort of like variance, basically. If a porch is added, you're allowed to build like halfway into the setback based on your neighbors and your, something. So yeah, there's a history of altering and adding and encouraging adding porches in town.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering if, you know, if the thing was never there originally, and somebody put it on 40 years ago, you know, or before the ordinance in 76, you know, Does it make the building look good? Sometimes they don't make the building look good. Sometimes it'd be better if you could see the actual building.
Right. Well, that's where I would hope that if you come to the project review board with a design that says, hey, look at this ugly porch that was added in the
Yeah, well, that's-
70s. I'm trying to get it back to the way it used to be,
Yeah.
or I'm trying to alter the porch in a way that is, then maybe you're, I mean, it's still, it's not
Anyways.
outright prohibited, should be avoided. And my feeling about A is, it's pretty general, I think we already said that, right? I mean, that you just look one sentence above, the removal of a porch, stoop, or any individual features should be avoided. Porches and stoops should be preserved to the greatest extent possible. I think it's just, I don't think we need it, but it doesn't really do any harm, so I don't.
What, this should be avoided?
No, the A,
Oh, A.
Yeah. Right, I mean, I think generally what the blurb on 3 and then A is getting it, if you were coming to the board for a change and you were going to, come forward with a proposal that removed the porch, it uses this, preserve to the greatest extent possible, or it should be avoided. It leaves open for an applicant to make a case, that there could be a good reason. So if that reason is that, the porch was added at a certain date, or in the long history of the building, there was only a porch there for a, minimal amount of time, like I think that.
Or I really need to close in the porch because I need the square footage.
Well, that's a different issue if you close it in.
Well, it is, that's what I'm saying, is it allowed or not allowed?
Well, I think we're getting to in B, so, that's a door.
D takes care of that.
D, yeah.
Glass.
All right, so let's move on to 3B. If a door is to be closed off and other entrances to the building are to be used, removal of historic porches and stoops is not permitted. So that's,
So you have a stoop to nowhere?
yeah, it's basically getting at the stoop itself, regardless if there's a usable entrance, is still an important thing to maintain, or that someone could open up that entrance again in the future, and if they did want to do that, then you would have the
We
porch.
still working on storefronts?
This has moved on to porches and entrances,
This
so.
would count on a house too.
Review page 16. Yeah, and one of the things we saw, they showed an example of this, was a property on School Street that had a front door and some steps. And they kept the trim and the surround and the steps, but it's a retail shop, so they filled it in with glass. And it was a sample of, somebody else could come in and easily just put in a door and be more historically.
Or you can imagine if it's on
accurate.
Main Street, it's a place to sit for somebody to, it's not a bench, but it's something like that. It's a feature of, it adds to the feeling of downtown. It might not, hopefully people don't do things that don't make sense. So, I could also imagine, and I would be in favor of adding something, just to clarify that if you're doing an entire reworking, like if you're closing off the door because you're moving it over by 4 feet in a way that is historically accurate or something like that, like then you should be able to alter the stoop appropriately. Or if you're reworking the entire front of the building, then you don't have to leave your stoop there going to a window or something like that. I could imagine a situation in which it would make sense to remove the stoop because you are altering the rest of the building in such a way that is both historically accurate and would make it ridiculous to have a stoop there.
So it's exactly the same as what you had before under one, what was it, where was it? Under 2, at the beginning of 2.
So what if,
See, remember when you said maybe, so it's exactly the same thing. In altered storefront, back to 2, the beginning, the storefront can be retained or returned to its historic appearance. It's the same thing you want to say here. When replacement is necessary, replacement must match the dimensions of the existing porch to the greatest extent possible, or match historic,
what about a different way to get to maybe the same place or a similar place, which would be to say, if a door is to be closed off but retain its trim and moldings, it's like, so that it still looks like a door, even though it's not.
Are we concerned about a door being there? Are we
It's B.
concerned about a series of solids and voids that line up, you know.
I'm concerned about this one sentence being used to close off the possibility of removing a stoop by the narrow interpretation of saying, you're reworking the front of your building and you're closing off that door, therefore you can't remove that stoop, because that's what this says.
I'm with you.
Even if the door is closed off and the building is altered in other ways. Like, I think what this is saying is, if the door is closed off, as in, like, you take the knob out so that it's no longer, and you
Walk it
screw it to the wall.
Yeah. Right.
So it no longer works as a door, but it still looks like a door. That's the
Right.
situation that we're trying to get at here. I just don't want it to be taken so literally that it applies to other situations where you're also closing off a door. But you're going further than that, and that's my only, does that make sense, Kyle? Do you think you can cover
Yeah, I
that?
think
All
I
right.
got it.
How do you, so you think you can get there so that people can,
Yeah, we can work on adding like a provision where if you're like reworking the facade that a door is on and you're like slightly adjusting the placement of the door on that facade, that you don't need to basically have two doors
You don't
next to
yeah.
each other, like separated by a million inches.
One other concern with C would be if that porch wasn't or stoop wasn't, original, if it was
That's
an
what I was-
add-on, like in the, the 1960s,
Yeah, why do you have to match the existing? Why wouldn't it
should
be
be matched
matching
as historic.
the existing or historic?
when you look at the Holden block downtown where Patagonia is, the front of that's been changed a bunch of times.
Yeah,
Right,
I
and
think,
now they can't, now they're gonna say they
think-
have to do that? What if they want to take it back to something older?
Yeah.
I think this could be achieved with a similar alteration of what was above, of saying replacement must match the dimensions and details, or may match other,
That's what I was
contributing,
referring back to
like,
too. I
similar
was on
situations,
this.
yeah.
Or if evidence exists, return to its historic appearance. That's what you had before. Okay.
Well, E almost gets you there, doesn't it?
Recreating a porch.
Now, let me see.
Extensively. Yeah. it
Oh,
does.
yeah.
You're right.
Should say porch or stoop with a design.
Maybe, what if the, yeah, I wonder if
What if
C
I want to
could be,
recreate the porch that's right there? It's falling down, and I want to redo exactly it
And you
as
don't
it's
need a-
already been extensively
well,
modified.
in that case, you actually don't need a design permit, then you're just repairing,
That's right, you're just repairing.
it.
Oh, well, what
It's
if
not a
I want to,
modification.
okay, and if you wanted to change it in any way,
And you need
then
to-
you have to go historic.
Or if you want to take it, if you want to tear it off, and if you found a picture of a historic one,
Yes,
it was
but,
there originally, and the
but
one
what
you
if,
got isn't.
okay, what if there's a really ugly porch on there, and I want to put a different porch on
porch
there?
on there.
A different ugly porch on there, right?
If you can
Different
find an
You
existing,
can find a
non-historic.
picture of it?
A non-historic porch.
You gotta go through the old pictures and find a picture of a house just like yours with a ugly porch on
I
it.
think that's covered, that's where you get into E, is if you're recreating a porch or stoop that was, I'm gonna change out extensively
was all-
modified with really ugly,
Right.
use historic photos or physical evidence,
If it's, right.
right?
Fugly.
All right, so you're asking them to return the porch to some historic style.
Yeah.
I guess here's the part that bothers me. You have a building that was historic once upon a time, but this part over here is not historic anymore because it's been modified. And now they want to modify it, and they want to make it modern. They want to put in all glass from one end to the other. And they're not destroying something historic, they're destroying something non-historic and replacing it with something different non-historic that they think is nice. And are we trying to freeze Freeport in some time? Now you're saying they have a right to change it if they revert it to some historic period, which is not real anymore because they're just recreating it.
I guess.
Why are we freezing Freeport in a historic period of time? I understand why we might be saving artifacts, but I don't know why we're not enabling Freeport to become more contemporary looking over time.
So I guess the idea would be that if a property or a building was modified enough that it would no longer be a contributing building in the first place and wouldn't have to meet these standards.
Well, but I'm assuming in this case, you have a contributing, I mean, take the, where are we? I'm sorry, I gotta go right back to where we were.
17.
When recreating a porch or stoop that was extensively modified, so you're saying that the building had major modifications, but is still contributing. But this thing isn't what's making it contributing, this thing was extensively modified. So what are we saving, and why are we telling him he has to go backwards in
I
time?
think we're saying in that case, and again, I'm looking at E, but I think we are sort of saying, okay, you don't necessarily have to build to this, bad standard from whenever this addition was done and it wasn't done well, but you need to build to some basic standard that we have in town that sort of includes these design elements that are the basic design elements that we've agreed, or at least more or less agreed on. Like, it has to have window trim, and it has to have, like, it's gotta have some
But that's, that, for sure, that's already in the rest of the ordinance, but here you're saying it has to be historic. If they're changing something that was extensively modified, they have to go to historic.
I think the idea is that, in your example, like 90% of the building is already that kind of historic nature, and you just have this one aspect that wasn't. So as this is a design ordinance, it's getting at, this kind of design.
back to
So
that
for this
period.
property that was largely of a historic character, if you are going to modify that one part, then it should be in line with the rest of the building. If you're doing a new building, yeah, we can be more modern, and but I think that's the intent it's getting at.
I do feel like we've naturally seen this, like, people will come and replace porches, and they look a little bit different because they have to meet code, but like generally the same, the railings will be higher, the steps might be different. But in some of these historic buildings, like, that's part of the reason that people are buying them, and in a few cases, like, they've wanted to take off the porch, that's not accurate. They go visit the Historical Society, they see the old photos, and that's what they're striving for. So I do think we'll see a natural compliance, not always, but I do think with those A or B buildings that are significant, a lot of times there's a reason people are buying them. But if you don't feel like it's important, that's up to you guys, because you make the policy, not us.
I'm really interested in what the rest of the board thinks. I mean, I'm taking the building that made across the street, so they have a big porch in the front. And if they wanted to replace the rails, the pickets, with horizontal wires, which is a very modern way to make a porch, they would not be allowed to do that under this ordinance, which may be what the community wants and may be okay. I'm not necessarily against it, I'm just trying to be clear about what we're saying, that now that building must, now I guess in that case, it already is historic, so so maybe that's not a good example because it is a historic thing.
No, I think it's a great example.
But if it's not,
The
but
way
if
I
it
would
wasn't
read
a
it, that they
historic
can't do
porch,
it.
if the rest of the building was historic, but the porch wasn't, they couldn't put a modern porch on. They'd have to put a historic porch.
The way
I
this
mean, I
reads,
think that's
yeah.
what the community wants, actually, but I just think it should be clear.
Yep.
So you just want it to be a little more blunt, that you can't put a modern porch on an old building.
Well, I mean, that's what it says. I think it is clear. I just wanted to make sure everybody knows what we're saying, that
Yeah.
you have.
Under the current design ordinance, I got a design review permit once to put, I haven't done this, so I have to go back and get a new one if I actually want to do it. But I did get a design permit to expand the steps in front of my house and put a cable rail on those steps, even though it's not historically accurate necessarily. I think the board felt like, okay, it's a nice look.
It's a nice look.
Yeah, it fits in.
Okay, but this would not permit it.
Potentially not, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we sit here and talk about it, but we're not the ones that decide in the end, it's somebody else.
Right.
We can all agree that, you know, all right, you can have cable railings on your steps, but, you know, somebody else looks at it and says, I don't think it says that.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
All right, well, we can
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's an interesting
come
one. I
back to
think
it,
it's like
let the
in
board
that,
think about it a little bit. This isn't the
Okay.
last time we're gonna see it.
All right.
in
you know.
that,
We
in
can go
that
on.
narrow case, I might be okay with like more modern
That sounds good.
railing options, but yeah, I think that's a fair, that's an interesting one to flag.
If people wanna, yeah, just flag it, well, and maybe think of some alternate language and bring it back, you know.
So we
when it
said,
makes
be
sense.
more clear if modern porches / features like cable rail would not be allowed.
Or if the board does think they
Well-
should be.
I mean, the question is, in the case where you already have a modified, you're not mucking with anything that made the building contributing. You're mucking with something that didn't make contributing, so why don't you have freer reign within the rest of the design standards?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, like, if you're adding a feature that wasn't, I mean, the historic part of it says that features that are added to a historic building should fit in with the historic building. I mean, I think a railing is an interesting example, but like, if you're gonna put a window in the front of a historic building, it kinda ought to match the historic details,
So let me just
right?
take, I want to go home too, so
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't do my usual thing. But like, let's just say you have a building that is historic here and has an addition from the 50s here. And they decide they want to tear down that addition from the 50s and replace that addition. But the part that made it contributing was here, and that wasn't it. Can they not put a modern addition there? You see what I'm saying?
I
Or
see
do
what you're
they
saying.
have to
Yeah,
build a
definitely.
historic addition?
I think the way I would read this is it should, the details don't necessarily have to be the same, but they have to, like, be proportionally similar, or they have to be appropriate to details that are found on other contributing buildings in the district, something like that. Like, you might be able to say, well, you don't have to build the exact same roof trim that's on the historic part of the building, but you have to use a detail that is similar to your neighbor's roof trim, or something like that. Like, some,
From the era, so
Yeah.
I mean, it's, yeah.
yeah, like, you know,
From the area, not.
Era.
I have another,
But the problem with that word era is that we don't have a consistent era across town. We have.
I mean, another example from my own catalog of design review permits is, and keeping with the theme of things I've permitted and then not built because, you know, COVID hit and everything else. But I got a permit to replace the barn roof trim, I think. Maybe I'm making part of this up. Anyway, doesn't matter. The idea was that the roof trim was not exactly the same, but it was like a simpler version of something similar that was historically appropriate to barns. And it didn't match, but it was similar. And the board was like, fine, yeah, that looks nice.
Did you do that?
No, I didn't do that.
No.
Ran out of time and money and.
Most people do stuff and don't permit it. You permit stuff and
Permit stuff and don't do it.
He's just into collecting permits.
I-
Don't disclose that on the record.
I'm allowed to permit things that I don't
Yeah, a
do.
lot of,
It's totally okay.
a lot of people do it.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll flag it and we can come back to it and maybe think of some language here. All right, so F, increasing the depth of a porch or adding a railing to accommodate code or accessibility requirements is permitted where details and materials are matched to the existing design.
Yeah, that's fine.
It was fine.
G, if handrails must be added to granite steps, handrails should be mounted in the ground adjacent to the steps whenever possible. And I do remember seeing an image example of this in one
The
draft.
Starbucks building has that
Oh,
on the
right.
side, not attached to the granite.
Sure, if it meets code.
At the moment.
All right, so if no comments there, 4 is rooftops. So the general provision or intent here is the original character of a roof should be preserved, including its form and design features. So A, retain and preserve roofs that contribute to the character and form of a contributing building, including the roof shape, pitch, line, overhang, and any functional or decorative features.
Does this prohibit you from having a dormer?
Yeah, that was the only place I had a problem was with C.
So, yeah, C, I think, goes into new dormers. So new dormers should match the proportion rhythm of the window openings in the original building. Dormers should be set back from front and side facades.
Yeah, so stop there. That seemed fine, but everything that follows doesn't seem fine. Because unless that matches the rest of the design ordinance, maybe it does.
Dormers should be set back from the front and side facades.
Yeah, like why? What if it matches, what if the original building didn't do that?
I would say side facade would be historically accurate, like a dormer shouldn't go all the way to the side. But the front,
What
I
if the
mean,
historically accurate did?
I'm not clear when you say side and set from,
yeah, that's true, it's not very clear.
It's not clear.
Because like, if the gable is facing the street, is that still the side? For a dormer, it's kind of the side of the dormer, even though it's sort of the front of the house. So it's not, you might want to switch front and side to gable and eave, or rake and eave would be more accurate, because a shed dormer doesn't have a gable, but it does have a rake, and a gable dormer also has a rake.
So we need to work with them to get a little
Yeah,
clarity.
a little more clarity. I would also say, I think the intent here for the last sentence is to say, long shed dormers are permitted only on roof planes not visible from the street, but I don't know.
Yeah,
That
I
was
found
sort of a
that kind of
question.
weird, because then it wouldn't be applicable anyways, but I think that way reads better.
Yeah, so I would add the word. But also long isn't really defined. I mean, what's a long shed dormer? I mean, so maybe say like shed dormers more than 2/3 of the length of the unbroken eave or something like that. So give it some sort of metric that makes sense. And anyone who builds dormers where they're closer together than they are wide, like you gotta be able to get between them to work on them. So hopefully, that one makes sense to me.
All right, were there any comments on 4B? We skipped over that one. Maintain the perceived line and orientation of the roof as seen from the street.
Right.
Okay. D, rooftop addition should be set back from the front and side facades to limit their visibility from the street and to preserve the character defining roof form of the existing building.
What's a rooftop addition?
Like a widow's walk? Or a, yeah, I don't know. It's not really,
Yeah.
I think it's probably pretty rare.
I know some people have dormers and they have a deck there where they can step out.
Maybe a dormer counts as a rooftop addition, in which case we should just say dormer.
You know what I mean? Some people have a little railing there where they can,
Right.
you know, the window folds up or something, there's a little, ends up being a little deck there. Is
Right,
that-
or the dormer's out to, it's like a sugar pan,
Yeah.
sugar scoop, I forget.
Yeah, whatever they call
Dustpan? No, that's yeah, something else. Anyway, where you cut into the roof and then you could, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe add some
You have a
clarity.
little deck there.
Yeah, because it wouldn't,
Examples of what a rooftop addition.
it
Should have
wouldn't be a
pictures.
dormer, because it would be in the last
So
one.
the placeholder for the pictures, you know, shows that it'll show standards, really all of the roof standards. So yeah, that might be better illustrated in the graphic as well. All right, move on to doors on page 19. So the character defining features of an original door and its distinct materials and placement should be preserved. When new doors and door openings are necessary, they should be visually compatible. Your favorite, Mitch, with the original doors. This is especially important
At
on.
least that's clear what we're compatible with, that it should
Well,
look
yeah,
like.
and as we mentioned last time, the couple uses of that phrase in this ordinance isn't actually in one of the standards. It's in that kind of general intent of a section, so.
Which verbiage are you talking about? Original
The
door?
visually compatible, so when new doors and door openings are necessary, they should be visually compatible with the original doors. And right, that is the difference in sort of how they use it a couple times here compared to our current ordinance, whereas current ordinance is saying visually compatible to the buildings in the surrounding area.
Correct.
This is using it just to talk about itself, really.
We did recommend while you're out of the room facetiously adding visual compatibility to another standard, but.
All right.
In character.
So 5A, preserve features including door frame sills, heads, jambs, moldings, detailing, transoms, stained glass, and flanking side lights whenever possible. So I think the whenever possible is, I mean, that's doing a lot of work there. It encourages it, but, it leaves room for flexibility. B, if an entrance will no longer be used, leave the door in place and secure it. Removal of the door and elimination of the opening is not recommended.
Is it not allowed?
I think it seems to me like it strikes a pretty decent balance of discouraging, but allowing for the possibility of somebody saying, hey, this isn't working for me. I've got this idea for an addition that's gonna still respect the historic nature of the house somehow.
Somebody might have jacked in a door 40 years ago that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, or even hey, I want to add a porch, and I'm doing an interior remodel, and the flow of that door doesn't make any sense, and I want to turn it into a window, and I can show that it's still going to look good, and the board's going to agree with me, and so I'm going to drop these plans. I mean, that is a imaginable scenario to me. So.
Right. 5C, when new doors are required, documentation. When new doors are required, should be used to determine the style of previous doors. If historic photos or physical evidence cannot be found, replace the door with a design appropriate to the style of the building, using examples of other contributing buildings with the same style and era in the district that have retained original doors.
Except for the extra comma, I think.
Yeah.
Where's your under after documentation?
Documentation, yeah.
I think maybe we should add in the second sentence, if documentation such as historic photos or physical evidence, because it's kind of vague in the first sentence.
Like, it doesn't have to be drawings with dimensions.
Like, I don't want them to
documentation.
come in with some random piece of paper and be like, here's documentation, and it's, something they got a Hannaford today.
Okay. 5D, new door openings should be located on side or rear facades rather than the main facade whenever possible to minimize their visual impact. So this is aimed at, you have other standards, trying to preserve the primary facade kind of entrances. If you're going to introduce a new door, do it on the side or rear.
And this is for any building in the district, not just stores, right?
Well, any contributing building, but
Any
yeah,
contributing building.
could be residential or commercial or whatever.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think windows are an interesting one.
Okay, let's move on to windows. No comments.
Okay, so I only have the one change in, is 5C. I guess I kind of a little bit questioned 5D. We can go back and look. I thought there were some other things about having a front door. So I get like if you're adding another door, but if you didn't have a front door, this wouldn't allow you to add one.
Well, wherever possible, right? So maybe I'm giving too much credit, but to a review board just saying, well, yeah, it's not, you need a front door and it's not possible to add
Should
one
be-
except.
Should probably be spelled out to some
Yeah.
extent.
Yeah.
A new installation would,
Yeah, I mean, is it covered, like, if you were gonna add a front door on a building that didn't have one facing the street, and you would have to use trim details that are appropriate for the district, right? That's how I would interpret something, but I don't know if it's specifically spelled out. Could say, I mean, maybe if you just say, like, if a new door opening on the main facade is to function as a front door, it should be detailed in similarly to other, primary entrances in the district or something like that. Other contributing, or front doors on contributing buildings.
All right, windows, when new windows are necessary, they should maintain the character defining features and arrangement of original windows. So A, historic wood window sashes and surrounds should be retained and repaired to preserve the historic fabric whenever possible. B, new windows should replicate the pattern of the window sashes in the architectural style of the house. Documentation, if available, should be used to determine the prior style of the window or contributing buildings of a similar style may be used as a reference.
Just the word house may be the wrong word. Since of the building.
Building, yeah.
Yep.
What do you,
In
6B,
2B,
6B, the
6B,
word
sorry.
house should be building.
yeah,
That's all I had on that.
C, alteration of the number or location of windows by cutting new openings is not permitted on primary facades of contributing buildings. Window alterations are permitted on secondary facades.
I don't know about that one. Sorry. As somebody who has considered adding a bay window, I'm not going to do it, but there was a time where I thought about adding a bay window to the front of the house because like the house right across the street from us has a bay window in the front, and I thought, oh, that's really nice.
Well, I mean, it does seem kind of limiting not to be able to, put in a bigger window.
Yeah, or like,
Even if it's similar in nature.
yeah, or like
Wow.
there's another house right up the
So
street.
what if it said unless historical precedents can be shown or something like that?
it could interfere with egress if you're trying to put a bedroom on the front of your house if you
Right.
can't put a big enough
Yeah,
window.
there
Yeah.
have been some of these, right, where people want to change the use inside and then they need to put in a larger window or.
Yeah,
I don't see any real big deal.
I think putting guardrails on it to say something about the way in which an alteration is or is not acceptable.
Yeah.
I also, there's another house up the way that I think was probably built by the same builder. It's like it's got very similar details. And instead of, our house has the front door offset and then one window and then stacked, a window above the front door and there's another house that's very similar that has two windows, next to the front door.
Right, so
And
why
it looks,
couldn't you do that if
yeah,
you wanted?
if I wanted to. I don't, but,
Right.
But if I did, it would probably look nice.
You should be able to do that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's saying you can't cut new openings or unless there's historical precedents.
Yeah, or historically, yeah.
Yeah, historic reference.
Usually it's visually compatible with a house up the street.
I mean, we can take there's language elsewhere, documentation using the photo evidence or historical, right?
Yep.
That sort of verbiage.
Makes sense.
So we want to allow it with documentation, I'm gonna clarify.
Yeah. All right, 7, additions to contributing buildings. Additions shall not damage or obscure significant historic building features. They shall be physically and visually subordinate to the original building.
So that's the one that flagged me again.
I mean, I would say that B and C sort of go together. If it's located to the side and rear, it's going to be more
Well, but what if,
visually subordinate, but.
I would strike physically, because what if you have a really small cape
Yeah.
in a downtown location and somebody says, well, I really want to buy that house, but I need more space for my family, or I want to build a large garage or something.
it could be bigger, I mean.
Right.
Sure.
But if it's set back in a way that says it's visually,
Right, like maybe the existing structure, right, stays towards the front, but the larger addition,
Yeah.
is towards the rear of the property or whatever. Is everyone good with that in B, striking physically then?
Yeah, for sure.
So we're just striking.
Physically and gets
Physically
struck.
and,
So you're striking visually or physically?
Physically.
Physically.
Physically, so it could be, visually subordinate means it could be set back.
and then, I mean, it is punting a little bit to the board to say, the project review board that is, to say what counts as visually subordinate, but I think I'm okay with that.
So if made, their parking lot is bigger than their building. And if for some reason they wanted to turn that into a big emporium and put a building entirely taking up that parking lot, you wouldn't want them to hurt the building, a beautiful building. So maybe if it's set back, that's what visually subordinate, but it would be physically bigger, could be.
So we're taking out physically.
Doesn't hurt the building.
so the board sees that as with regard to setback, not physical size?
Yeah, the question is, what does visually subordinate mean? And so really what you're trying to do is offset from, or something like that. You want to,
Yeah, I think the other thing that might help there is to visually subordinate from where, right? And then, I mean, that made is a tough situation, right? Because they're at a corner lot, so it would be pretty hard to have an addition be visually subordinate to the original building when you're viewing it from what's it called?
Portland
Street?
Museum of
Holbrook
Art,
Street.
the Portland Museum of Art has a very old, a very old historic building, in the back.
Behind,
in the
yeah.
back.
The back, right.
And they built a big, big building in the front. And it didn't really hurt the back. I mean, that building is still a gem. And this big monster thing, which actually has lots of references to the buildings around it in scale and size, but in a very different vocabulary.
Well, it depends on whether you're on Spring Street or Congress or Free Street.
Right.
Which is the back, which is the front.
Right, but that's what I don't see why that shouldn't be allowed. In other words, you haven't hurt that building.
Well, and I would also say that, if you put an addition onto a historical, building, why can't you have a modern, tasteful,
Right.
modern materials, different window patterns, different door patterns, I see stuff
It
going
shouldn't
up all the time. It looks
damage the
great against an old farmhouse, So I don't know that I buy into that part of it.
So you're thinking like strike the whole thing?
Well,
Potentially.
perhaps, or,
What about retaining?
Subordinate, it shouldn't hurt, it shouldn't damage the,
But I think the obstruction is, what about, like, the original contributing building needs to be visible from a public right-of-way? So like in your maid example, you could imagine a new building or a large addition, let's say, that meets the other design standards of the district, as it would have to, that does change the view of the contributing building from Holbrook Street.
from Holbrook Street.
But doesn't from Main Street, so maybe
Thinking
retain.
about the community center, that went through a lot of public scrutiny. The historical
good
society was
example.
very involved. They have the two mallet buildings.
Right.
There's a really big addition on the back, which they set back, and you can see it, but the first thing you see is those cute mallet buildings.
Right.
Freeport Village Station, there was very careful consideration when they added that, based upon a lot of input from the Historical Society, to separate the addition, kind of remove it from the mallet building. And I wouldn't necessarily call that subordinate because it's so large, but again, just an example of where they give some kind of separation with the addition to preserve that character
So
or
that-
integrity of what's there.
so you preserve the integrity of the building, that's what you're trying to do, however you define that, that's right.
Of the
The
original
rest of it
structure.
doesn't matter, whether it's bigger, whether it's modern. You just don't want to
Yeah, the original
fuck up the
building.
building.
Thank God there's no minutes.
I was just gonna say, I don't think I heard that correctly.
I know.
Okay, so are you saying you don't want any of these 7A through G? You just want to say addition shall be done?
Addition should not obscure or damage significant historic building features. That's good.
That's it.
Do we want to be more specific about maintaining a view
Follow
from
the-
a right-of-way? Or is that just kind of,
Perhaps, not opposed to that necessarily.
And then add something about trying to clarify positioning it to preserve the integrity of the original building.
Sure.
okay, so does that mean we're basically striking
Striking the rest of it,
B and C?
and D, and E, and F, and G.
Gotcha, sorry.
I mean, again, if they don't obscure the original building and they do abide by the design standards elsewhere, what is the issue?
No, I'm with you. I do think that F,
So are you basically saying, though, that you want additions to contributing buildings to be treated as non-contributing
Yeah,
buildings?
correct.
So I think we should clarify.
Additions.
As long
that.
as they, but they cannot obscure.
Right, not a, right, if they
Right.
meet that condition, but everything else, they don't need to, because otherwise, you can get rid of all this language, but if it's still part of that contributing building, then we're gonna go to all these other standards for doors and windows and roofs
No,
of
that's
contributing buildings.
nutty. It's-
If you're, yeah, so we should clarify.
I wonder if there's like
Every
a
addition-
size,
What?
like is it the case where if you're adding a small addition, it might make, I'm thinking out loud here, I'm not saying.
Yeah, I know, I hear you. Like, if you added just a little thing, you'd kind of want it to match, but
Well,
not
then you can.
necessarily.
You
That's
can
kinda
if
where I'm
you're
coming
the,
to. It's like,
Yeah, you always can.
Yeah,
You
you
want
always
Always
can.
can.
And sometimes you might add a little bump, okay, my college professor's work at Bowdoin, the Bowdoin Art Museum, McKim-Mead and White, one of the most significant buildings in the state of Maine is that museum, and there is a tiny addition on it that is hyper-modern.
it's a glass, yeah. And actually where I went
And
to
it's
college, there's a
beautiful.
very similar thing where they connected a big stack of brick buildings, a little glass atrium.
And it's
Pretty cool.
It's cool, and it didn't hurt the building.
I
It didn't
think-
obscure the integrity of the building.
So along this line of thinking, I think we need to revisit the definition of alteration, because the definition of alteration includes an addition.
Oh.
So you'd want those to be clearly separated.
Correct.
Like, the definition of addition is an improvement that increases the square footage of a structure, which I think is fine, but alteration includes addition.
I would maybe make the tweak to distinguish between an addition that increases the square footage and an alteration, sorry, can I start it? Basically, if it changes the footprint, like the foundation,
Yes, if it changes the foundation, it's an addition. If it's anything else, it's an alteration.
because a dormer could be counted as an addition,
Yep.
but I don't know if we want modern dormer. Like, that's
Right.
kind of a different bucket to me. Like, if you're gonna put a dormer on your contributing building and you're imagining this like glass cube sticking out, like, I don't know. Like,
Right.
that might be a bridge too far for downtown Freeport right now.
It's okay for the
So,
Well, you're certainly messing with the building.
right, it's a different, so I think making that
The roof line
distinction.
issue.
Yeah.
So you could say in 7, for additions to contributing buildings, right, you don't obscure or damage. If you're doing an addition that increases the square footage of the building footprint, the addition shall follow
Abide
the
by it, yeah.
non-contributing building standards. But any addition, that doesn't increase the building footprint, then, you follow the contributing building standards. Something like that.
Yeah.
All right. Is that clear, Caroline?
I put Kyle will add exact wording tomorrow.
I will forget all of this by tomorrow.
And I noted the time. We'll be good.
All right.
We're still being recorded. Right?
Well, so this is the last section of the contributing building standards. So I think,
The only thing left is your,
Section
so now we have demolition,
demolition.
and then the last couple sections, they're appeals, severability, and conflict with other ordinances, which are more procedural stuff. Do we want to?
demolition matches what's there today, is that correct?
So I believe the only change is the 3 months. It's 4
Yeah,
months currently.
Shorter. I don't know if,
I thought the 3 months sounded short.
We've talked about shortening it.
So it's 4 currently.
Yeah. So that's up to you guys, but
I think
so I think what's been hard under the current ordinance, we've saved buildings under it.
what?
Under the current ordinance, back in the day, we had saved buildings. We haven't done that as much recently, but times have changed, developments changed. 4 months is a long time when you're taking off a little piece of a building, and if you have an A or B building and it has a historically inaccurate addition, nobody wants it, you want to take it off, you still have to wait. So this still doesn't allow a waiver. So even if you have a portion of a building, I believe it deals with just a portion, Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, you are still gonna have to wait that time period if you're on a contributing building, even if that feature
Is not part of it.
is not part of the original. Yeah, we had that at Ella Bean. Elo's house.
Down the old section up there.
He had a smoking room, and it wasn't original, and they still had to wait the 4 months. Nobody wanted it. So I'd say like that is a downside to slowing development or slowing projects.
This 3A, not get at what you're talking about? The applicant may request the 3-month delay period be waived if it's determined that the building or portion.
Yeah, nope, that's good. That's what I was referring to. That is also a change because they don't have that now.
Right. That's where it's, so like, for example, if someone wanted to demolish and rebuild a porch or something that's connected to, like, if there's a clear plan to rebuild, right? Can't you say, hey, I'm applying for this design permit, and with it, can you please waive my demolition permit so that I can, once I have my design permit, I can just go and get a building permit, and I don't have to wait because I have a plan and I'm demolishing this small porch that's whatever part of my house, but I'm gonna rebuild it in this way that you're finding to be visually, compatible with the standards, and so please waive my demolition. Is that kind of what that's geared toward? It's like you could get that finding in one meeting. You could go to the meeting, you could get your design review certificate and your demolition waiver. Then you could, the next day, go to the codes and submit your building permit, and then, whatever it takes them to
Yeah, if
turn
you
that
could
around.
get a waiver, I think.
I like that. I mean, I think that's a good.
All right, so are there any other comments with the demo section or,
Or the remainder of the document.
yeah, on those last couple there?
Not have any marks.
Yep, I'm good with it. I think we made a lot of
We got there.
substantive edits. All right.
All right, so Caroline can take those back, work on changing some of the language where we can. Be passing along some of the comments to North Star if we need them to weigh in on something. But then giving kind of the revised document over to them to add in the graphics.
The pictures.
and
Next time
all
we see it, it'll have
that.
pictures.
Yeah.
So I think the next time you see it and talk about it, it will have pictures. We'll probably, under your rules of order, have to notify everyone within the district. And I do want you to be aware this will look different. It does need some structural changes and some legal clarification and just some minor adjustments that were flagged. So it will look a lot more cleaned up, but it was really important to us to keep it moving forward, to get your input on the policy decisions. So I know you've had 2 long meetings, but these are decisions that staff can't make. So thank you for all taking the time to go through it.
I'll just say that, I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I did enjoy the fodder. I'll just say that I think that it is headed in the right direction. I'm probably more in Sam's camp than Mitch's camp on this one. And I think that one of the.
Mitch and I are as far
I don't
apart
think
as
we're that
yeah.
far apart.
I
One
think
of the-
there's definitely
trying to
some
tease
yeah.
our way
It's a
through.
middle path. But anyway, sorry, Dave. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, one of the things that I think hasn't been expressed yet is, and there's been a lot actually talk about what good is this for, and why would anybody want this, and why would anybody, do this from a developer standpoint. If I was a developer, I would want something like this in town, because I know there's a standard here. And if I'm making an investment in this town and there's no standard, then I'm at risk. And so I think to think that the developers are just against this is wrong. And they're probably looking at, they want something they can use that's functional, but they want this here. They want that in place for their investment. So,
And that's the feedback we've
think
gotten
that's
from
not been
developers
said.
over the years too. Is like, it's fine to have one. It just has to be usable.
Yeah.
And the process has to be clear. And
The minute everybody said that the purpose was to not have a fast food restaurant on Main Street, I got it,
well, it's not that we don't. Yeah,
Okay.
or it's at least it should look like a nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
The
it's
look.
yeah. I'm assuming there's nobody else. Right? There hasn't been any all night. So.
And I move we adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Rosemary, all in favor? That one's unanimous. Thank you.